Zheng's question made perfect sense, both rational and reasonable. Why had this trembling scrap of humanity decided to set her free? My brain, held in a death grip by fight-or-flight response, cowering and cringing beneath a 7-foot-tall monster leering over me with a mouthful of blood-stained razor-sharp teeth, squeaked an answer through my closing throat. Personal space, please. Zheng tilted her face-splitting grin and leaned closer. She sniffed me fierce sweat, dried blood, and the lingering ash taint of Wonderland. Scared, she purred, as a tiger would. My head jerked in a nod. I need you to straighten up, or personal space. Zheng placed one huge hand on top of my head. She rumbled. How did I stay standing? How did I, tiny weak Heather, not collapse to the floor and curl up in a ball? Because Wonderland had acted as a paradoxical inoculant. Zheng was terrifying, yes, but her terror was all reassuringly bodily and terrestrial. She moved with the barely veiled violence of a predatory cat at rest, but like a living being should do, not the awful click-clack ratcheting of the Lozzie-Thing. Big, very, very big and dangerous and scary, but not an affront to my senses or an invasive dismantling of my consciousness. I closed my eyes, felt my fingers twitch, and took my mind to the edge of the equation to send her outside. She let go of my head. Personal space. Room to breathe. That enough for you, little wizard? Her voice was like granite wrapped in silk. I opened my eyes and found her still far too close. She'd straightened up and eased back, kept only one hand against the concrete wall. I took a shuddering breath and felt a sudden deep appreciation for still having all my vulnerable extremities attached. Still scared? Zheng purred. Somehow, from the godforsaken black pit in my soul, born of a death wish or sheer exasperation, or perhaps with fear blotted out by my worry for rain, I managed to level a capital L look at Zheng. Of course I'm scared, I managed. You're huge. Thank you, she said. And you're not what I expected. Expected something more like your little demon. Barely awake, an idiot and half-mute. I've been here a long time, you monkeys have rubbed off on me. A long time? I almost asked her age. Was that a rude question, when speaking to a demon from outside? Still clutching the reflective space blanket Marcus had thrown me a few minutes ago, trying not to think about the poor man's cooling corpse several feet away, and also trying to ignore the overwhelming urge to inch away from Zheng, I did my best to see through the crimson gore on her face and read her as a person, as I did with Preem. Sharp-edged intelligent eyes, a wide and mobile mouth, and that thatch of greasy dark hair sticking out in all directions. She didn't make it easy, almost like she was showing off. As I watched, Zheng looked away and unhinged her jaw, working it from side to side as if the muscles were sore from disuse. She swallowed, grunted, and ran her tongue over her bloody teeth, a tongue easily 12 inches long, tapered to a point, a wet red tentacle of muscle. The tongue retracted back into her mouth, and I breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Preem. You mean Preem, I said. And she's not an idiot. Zheng's awful grin widened again. She made a head tilt radiate more threat than an entire room of professional thugs. What does it matter what I call your pet demon? Because I swallowed. My mouth was so dry. Because it's her name. I gave it to her. And she's not my pet, she's my friend. Zheng made a noise that sounded like a tiger turning over in its sleep. Don't you have a name? Zheng. They've been calling you Zheng is a name. And we're both mangling it. Her grin faded to sullen boredom. No, ZZ. More like, Jiang, quicker. Her pronunciation sounded vaguely Chinese to my ears, though the amount of spoken Chinese I'd heard in my life amounted to almost nothing. Zheng did look somewhat East Asian, but in a way I couldn't place. Her skin, light chocolate with a hint of red, gave me few clues. Not Chinese, I'd thought, but then again China is a very big place. Then I apologize, I stammered. I didn't mean to say your name wrong. I dash. Doesn't matter. Call me whatever you want. She grinned again. Could teach you my real name, but I'd have to break your jaw in 3 places and split your tongue, or you'd mangle that too. Of course, I sighed, unable to control my exasperation. Of course your true name would collapse my windpipe or blow out my eardrums or something. Obviously. Smart monkey, she purred. You are a demon, yes. The same as Preem. She shrugged, a huge gesture from her. I'm not from here. Clearly. Zheng, then. I did my best to say it right. Can you answer me now, wizard? Have I satisfied your little monkey brain that I'm not going to eat you too? Is your heart pumping a few paces slower? Yes, no, I almost squeaked. In that order. That extracted another grin from Zheng. She liked it when I shot back, and that gave me a few more scraps of courage to work with, to keep me on my feet, to keep up with her. Why free me, she rumbled. The grin grew across her face once more, toothy and bloody. I allowed my eyes to flicker toward the door, the now unlocked door, the key presumably still in Marcus' pocket. I tried very hard not to look at his ruined corpse on the floor with its burst melon skull. Aren't you worried they might come back? We. Zheng stared at me, grin fixed like the smile on a skull. Zheng. No. No, as in you and I are doing this right now, little wizard. She leaned in close again, slow this time, a snake hypnotizing a quivering mouse. I tried very hard not to be that mouse, to keep my spine upright and my knees straight. You freed me, and we're in trouble, you and I, deep in enemy territory, both woefully friendless. I need to know why, so I can choose between picking you up and carrying you out of here, or crushing your skull against the wall behind you. A lump in my throat. My limbs turned to water. I couldn't control the shaking. Alright, because you were guarding me. And I need to get out of here. That's why. The grin widened. No, that's not the real reason, she purred. I've seen what you do, little wizard. You dash. Heather, I squeaked. A tilt of the head. That's my name. Heather. Not, little wizard. I'm not even really a mage. Perhaps I was merely buying time for the moment I would brain math her into oblivion, but I told myself that if she knew my name, she might be less inclined to murder me. Zheng tilted her head the other way, thoughtful. Exactly. I've seen what you do, watched how you killed the old chief of this pathetic milk-blooded rabble. I've been gagged for years, but nobody's been able to blind me for decades. I remember you, Heather, and I think you could have dumped this body, she tapped her own chest, bloody fingertips sticky against the crimson-stained t-shirt anywhere you liked. Exploded my head. Taken my arms and legs off, left me to roll around like a turd. But you didn't. Why take the risk? I don't know, I dash. Twitch my fingers, get ready to reach out and grab her. All I needed was a second. Oh, this was such a terrible mistake. Why was she demanding an answer to this question? This was more like it, wasn't it? A classical demon wrapping the summoner in riddles, toying with me like a cat with crippled prey. Not good enough, she purred. I freed you to free myself. I blurted. Because I'm trying to escape, and I thought maybe you would want. Naive, or stupid? Not stupid, no. Naive? Maybe. Why did you free me, little wizard? Dig deep, and speak truth. I can't deaf on you, your magic works differently, but I can shatter your brain box faster than you can touch me with that little hand. My eyes went wide. Zheng made her point. She grabbed my wrist just to show me just how unafraid she really was. She held me like a gentle vice, iron strong but without squeezing. The things you were saying to me mere minutes ago, Heather. Those assumptions. I liked those. I liked those very much. Were they lies? I could have executed the equation right then, with her skin touching mine. Despite all her threats, I knew I could unweave the fabric of reality at the speed of thought. She was bluffing. Terror peeled back. A seed of doubt sprouted. The sharp-toothed grinning, the lazy intimidation, the riddle-like question she'd accept no rational answer to. Was this her survival strategy? She knew I could obliterate her with a thought, send her outside and strand her in some alien dimension, even if that's where she was originally from. So the only way for her to live through the next few minutes, after murdering perhaps justifiably one of her former slave drivers, after giving in to her hunger for meat right in front of me, was for her to intentionally trigger all the animal fears in my soft mammal brain, remind me that I was small, keep me guessing, make me think she was totally unafraid, all while skirting the line at which I'd resort to self-defense. She was trying to forge an understanding. And doing an awful job of it. Oh, damn it, I swore softly, right in her face, shivering all over. If you're going to kill me, at least I'm going to die warm. I huffed and shook off her hand. Luckily, she let me go. I would have been rather out of face if she'd decided to hang on. I tugged the space blanket around my shoulders and pulled it tight, hugging myself against the interior cold. Jing did this thing with her eyebrows, a quizzical kink so deep it would have been comical if she wasn't covered in blood. I freed you, I started, then made myself meet her eyes and stand up straight. All my body rebelled, but it was either this or murder her. I freed you instead of getting rid of you, because you were a slave. Nothing that can think for itself should be a slave. The grin returned, a wall of teeth. I'm no djinn, no friendly genie, she rumbled. Freeing me doesn't win you infinite wishes. I glared at her as best I could, a mouse staring down a tiger, as I wriggled one arm free and pointed at the door. My hand shook. Then go. Go wherever you want, do whatever you want. I have things to do. Jing shook her head. No wizard would ever say that to me. I'm the greatest prize this side of the Volga. And I barely even know where that is. I'm serious. I waggled my finger at the door. Go. Go on. Leave. I won't stop you. Zheng's grin faded to nothing. She clacked her teeth together, still shaking her head. Her breathing turned rough and urgent, halfway between confusion and desire. She squinted at me, incredulity and wonder around her eyes. I've been a slave for a very long time, she purred. The leash, sometimes short, sometimes long, often muzzled, but never withdrawn. Until now. Any other wizard would want me. I already told you. I'm not even really a mage. Jing nodded slowly, regarding me with a strange fascination in her eyes. Her silk and stone voice dropped to barely a breath, to caress an ancient reverence. Shaman, then, she said. Shaman, that word meant something important to her. If she'd been human, she would have shivered, her arms covered in goosebumps. I got the shivers instead, and they had nothing to do with how cold it was in that room. I stared back, eyes wide at the awful, hungry way she looked at me. Zizheng, I'm not Dash. It took an effort of will to close my gaping mouth, to look up at her eyes again. What? The binding. Take it all, she said between clenched teeth. Your tattoos. I swallowed and tried to see past Zheng's impressive physique, tried to ignore the boobs shoved in my face. The mass of semi-faded, layered tattoos on Zheng's torso really did cover every square inch of her duskin skin. One could spend hours unraveling and cataloging even a single hand span. I saw Chinese or Japanese in there, and stranger writing systems which, while not alien, were so foreign in time as to be utterly unknown today. My parents had taken me to museums when I was younger. Maisie and I, when we were little girls, and the artwork on Zheng's flesh reminded me dimly of the relics of a lost antiquity, seen under the harsh electric lights of the modern age, robbed of all their context and culture. Zheng was a work of art in more than one sense. I shook my head, lost for words. It's beautiful, I can't destroy dash. She leaned in close, fast enough to make me flinch. It is a chain, she growled. You freed me, Shaman. Either you want me free or not, or was that talk about slavery so much flapping meat? I focused on the tattoos again. Wet my lips. Trying to think. I'd been right about Jing, despite everything. Despite the gruesome cannibalism and the ugly threats, I'd been right. Zombie was a fancy mage word for slave. How could I blame her for asking this? Jing, I can't. I raised a hand to stall her snap-toothed rebuke. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm freezing cold. I'm dehydrated, I've been through an ordeal, and if I push myself too far, I could pass out and die. I will catch you, she purred, softly. I will look after you. I know this place, this tower. They have rooms up here, their usual mess, but there's a heater, emergency supplies. Food. And you won't get out of this building intact, little monkey, not without help. Not past the corruption downstairs. I cast about for some way to explain myself. But we need to get out of here first, we dash. No. She edged even closer, almost pressing herself to me. Not later. Now. You remove this, all of this, because as long as this remains I can be rebound with the right spells, the chains laid again, and I cannot trust you or yours yet, little shaman. I want to believe you, but I would sooner take my chances crushing your skull and slipping into obscurity. I will live under rocks and eat rat meat, naked and free, rather than risk it again. She bared her teeth. Finish cutting my chains. I can't. I shouted back in her face. Couldn't believe myself, not courageous but desperate. I have to rescue my friend, my lover. You heard what they were saying, them. The eye cultists. She might be here right now, and they're going to hurt her. I have to help her now, not in an hour after I pass out. A spark of thought snagged in the back of my mind. And Lozzie too, don't you remember her? She liked you, she said you were her friend. She might be here too. Lozzie-Thing rocked back, blinking, dropping the hem of her t-shirt as a strange confusion came over her features. She looked away, at nothing. Lauren, little Lauren. Yes, I dreamed of her. I was free in my dreams. Zheng's attention whipped back to me. Is she here too? I don't know. Then trust me, damn you, you hooting ape. Unchain me and I will find her, and your lover too. I will kill in your name. We'll have a deal, I'll be yours, in the old way, not in this false flesh. She grabbed a handful of her own skin. I ran my eyes over her imposing frame, over the tattoos beneath her flimsy t-shirt, over her muscles and what she represented. I couldn't find Rain by myself. Zheng was our best chance. Alright, okay. What is the minimum amount I can remove to make it safe? Safe for you, I mean. Zheng bared her teeth in a growl, a sound to make the bowels quake and the knees weak. She yanked up her t-shirt again, craning her neck to look down at herself, then she exploded with frustration. She shrugged her trench coat from her shoulders, dumped it on the floor, and then ripped the t-shirt off over her head in the most impressive act of disrobing I'd ever seen. I'd like to say I found nothing sexual about Zheng's nudity in that moment, but that would be a lie. Stripped from the waist up, she twisted and turned and lifted her arms to examine her skin, flexing the cords of toned muscle beneath. Quite a sight. Here, this spiral here, she circled a portion of her belly with a fingertip, then traced upward and across. To here, under my armpit, and here, below, that needs to go too. The shoulder blade, this stuff, and this, and these. I stared at her, trying to follow all the twists and turns she mapped out across her own flesh. This one as well, this is the root, this has to come out. And dash. Wait, stop, I held up a hand. Slow down, I need to, I'm going to have to do this in one go. I need a mental picture. Turn around again, let me start from behind. Jing grunted her acquiescence and twisted to show me her back. The part one hadn't said out loud was that her back was easier on my libido, less distracting. My eyes traced the pattern she'd indicated, and my hand wandered up, throat dry with anticipation. Could I really do this? It would be far more complex than selecting only the ink under my hand. Gingerly, I touched Zheng's muscled back, and began to nod as I linked the various structures together in my mind. Her skin felt hot, as if her body temperature ran several degrees above human. All right. Turn back around. Show me again, slower, and trace some connections too. I don't think I can do multiple places at once unless they're part of the same pattern. Object. Thing. Already half rummaging through the necessary equation in the black abyss of my mind, I nodded, distracted by the technical questions of the task. How do I know you'll really help me afterward? That you won't just leave? You don't. I'm a demon. She grinned. Combined with her top half nudity, the effect was a little too heady for me. You have to trust me, monkey. I made myself frown at her, made myself look like what she thought I was. This wasn't my life on the line. Who cared about me, what happened to me? At least if I died of exposure in this concrete room, I'd never see the eye again. This was about Rain, this was about my friends. Zheng's grin died. I'd made my point. You're Lozzie's friend, she purred. You killed my former master, and freed me. I owe you, in the old way, the real way. Finish freeing me, and I'll repay the debt. A tiny and intensely rational part of my mind screamed that Zheng was a demon, an outsider walking around in an ancient corpse, that her expressions and words were mere imitations of human communication. She'd follow her own unfathomable ends as soon as she'd gotten what she wanted. Perhaps she was lying to me, perhaps every part of this was a trick toward some incomprehensible end. She was alien. She wasn't supposed to be here. Preem was a demon. I trusted Preem, I stuck up for her, and she'd come through for me. Before I could second-guess myself, I pressed my hand against Zheng's abdomen, just above the waistline of her jeans, and stared at her tattoos. Should I do anything? She rumbled. Stay still, I hissed. And quiet. And then if I go, catch me before my head hits the concrete. Hyperdimensional mathematics with my eyes wide open, trying to describe the delicate tracery of Zheng's tattoos in mathematical terminology, to excise specific chunks of ink, was infinitely more difficult than I'd imagined. To remove what lay under the shape of my own palm was one thing, but the math required here made my eyeballs ache and an ice-pick headache tingle at the back of my skull before I'd even begun. I needed a better way to define Zheng's chains. I closed my eyes. Chains, bindings, ropes around her soul, that's what I was really removing. The ink needled under her skin was only outward representation. I dug with my mind, tried to define and see Zheng in mathematical representation, the same way I had done during my ill-fated attempt to track the Lozzie-Thing in Kimberly's flat. The ink itself, old and faded, in 100 languages, Zheng's skin, hot and supple, thick muscle and iron bone, cords of sinew and tendon, appropriated from her vessel and adjusted in a million inhuman ways too deeply biological for me to understand, filled with new structures and cells and impossible additions. Deeper, much deeper, past matter and blood, I found Zheng. A writhing shard of starlight, in chains. The whole picture, every layer described in hyperdimensional mathematics, held still in my mind. In that final instant before execution I felt hot crimson dripping from my nose and across my lips. I really needed to start taking iron supplements. Your plea, Zheng said. Out. Warm temptation lulled me back to the edge of sleep, but I found only shark-toothed grins and terrifying giants waiting there. I struggled up through layers of unconsciousness and jerked awake, gasping for air and scrubbing at my own eyes. Welcome back to Meat World, Zheng's voice greeted me. Where I croaked, pulling myself into a sitting position as my feet found the floor. I'd been curled up in a low chair of some kind, wrapped in warm, loose canvas cradling my weight a beach chair. A jumble of shapes and colors faded back into focus through my blurry vision. More plain concrete walls, but not the same room as before. I don't remember, I need water. A shape detached itself from the corner, rising and unfolding, and Zheng walked over to me. Rough but gentle hands took mine and pressed an open bottle of water into my weak, shaking grip. I didn't care if it was stale, drugged, or actually a bottle of lighter fluid. I put it to my lips and drank like my life depended on it. Which, to be honest, it probably did. Coughing, spluttering, my vision returning, I looked up and met Zheng's eyes. Blue. She'd washed the blood off her face while I'd been out. I feel like death, I groaned. You'll live, she purred. Seen plenty of you monkeys die, and you're not there yet. Zheng looked like a wheat field after a UFO visit. Her tattoos were covered in crop circles. She donned her blood-stained t-shirt again and draped the trench coat back over her shoulders, but that couldn't conceal the transformation I'd wrought on her body art. Wide circles of blank untouched flesh now punctuated the black mass of ink, each circle connected by at least one clear line of unblemished skin. Whatever I'd achieved with brain math at the end there, it had erased almost all the spirals from Zheng's tattoos. She grinned, the same unnerving shark-toothed grin as before. Thank you, little shaman. You're welcome, I think. What on earth does one say to a newly liberated giant zombie animated by a spirit from outside reality? I cast about the room instead, squinting through a real monster of a headache and trying to figure out where I was now. Sick of passing out and waking up in other places, I muttered. I tipped a little of the bottled water into my cupped hand and splashed it on my face, rubbing the corners of my eyes, before I downed the rest to wash the taste of blood and bile out of my mouth. Zheng had wrapped me in a pair of filthy blankets, apparently warm enough to stop me from freezing. A hissing gas-powered space heater poured warmth into the concrete room, rubber hose plugged into a freestanding canister, like some sprawling industrial spider dredged up from a nightmare of the 1970s. Well done, Zheng. Where? I gestured vaguely. One of their lairs, Zheng purred. Top floor. You passed out, easy to carry though. You weigh nothing, shaman. Need to eat more protein. One of the cult's lairs, the eye cult now, I suppose, and it looked the part as well. Another stripped concrete flat in Glasswick Tower, whether the same unit or a nearby one I couldn't tell. Once a sitting room, perhaps. Light entered through two filthy windows in the longest wall. The room was full of supplies and equipment, a first aid box, a plastic tote full of bottled water and cereal bars, a couple of crowbars against a wall, binoculars on one windowsill, rolls of tarpaulin, a tin of paint, and a dozen other innocuous everyday items, though I did wonder at the expensive fishing rod propped up in a corner. A magic circle had been inscribed onto the floor at the far end of the space, in black paint, surrounded by a few odds and ends, a bundle of feathers, a small knife, a single leather glove. An empty glass bottle stood in the middle of the circle. Whatever magic had been performed there, it wasn't active anymore. Another two beach chairs stood near the one Zheng had placed me in. Along with the space heater and a small stack of paperback books, they gave the distinct impression of a sort of watchtower or guard room. Zheng had caught one of the guards. A thin young man with a face like a seagull, wearing jeans and a zipped-up athletic hoodie, had been roped to the room's radiator much like I had, but with far more medieval sadism. A rope ran from each of his wrists to loop down under his groin, then up around his neck from behind, then to the radiator pipe and up to an old rusted curtain rail. The arrangement forced him to stand on tiptoes if he wanted to keep breathing. A dark blotch of urine had stained the front of his trousers. Terrified eyes met mine. "Help me," he whined, tears on his cheeks. Appealing to a fellow human being. "Please. Are you one of them?" He stared, half shaking his head, not understanding my question. "He is. I remember him well enough," Zheng grunted. "Jacob something. Unimportant. She's going to eat me. Jacob pleaded. Will you? I asked Zheng. Be a waste if I didn't. She shrugged, and turned a nasty grin on the bound man. Still full after the first course, but I've got room. Jacob closed his eyes in mortal resignation, trying not to weep. I looked away, didn't have the bandwidth for this right now. I was painfully aware I'd made an unspoken pact with something cruel and violent, which liked me for reasons I didn't entirely understand yet. My eyes alighted on a bundle of discarded clothes and a coat on the floor nearby, wrapped around strangely curved and spiked pieces of polished wood, lying as if dragged there. I blinked, couldn't quite make the connection, a sick feeling in my stomach. You want the bad news or the good news first? Zheng rumbled. What? I blinked up at her, my jumbled thoughts all lining up suddenly. Rain. Did you find Dash? Zheng shook her head. Bad news. She's not here. Neither's little Lozzie. A wrenching emptiness settled in my chest. What? No, they said. Top 2 floors. Zheng squatted down in front of me, lowering her incredible height so I didn't have to crane my neck. She looked almost apologetic. Been right down to the line where the corruption starts, but no further. I don't have safe passage through that anymore. You've seen that place? I nodded urgently. I know what you mean. Good news, he was the only thing here. She nodded toward the bound man. Sarika and her sad hound must have left, gone downstairs, gone home. Doubt they'd keep any prizes below the line, besides the dead master's corpse itself. No, they must have her somewhere else. You know all their safe houses, all the places they use, don't you? You know where she might be. You know how they think, you Dash. Zheng pulled a shrug with her face. Less than I know you, Shaman. Furniture doesn't get the need to know. You mean you don't know anywhere they might be? I started to shove the filthy blankets off me, wanted to stand up, felt so drained and weak, but had to do something. Had to find Rain, get back to Evelyn, call Twill. Something, anything. Not doors I'd knock on without knowing what's behind them, she rumbled. But yes, 3 safe houses I can think of, maybe, perhaps, if we're very lucky. Where? Zheng, tell me, where? The grin crested her features again. Why don't we find out for certain? What? She stood up without explaining herself, and met the eyes of the terrified man tied to the radiator. No, please. Jacob blurted out before either of us asked him anything. I don't know anything. I don't know, I dash. His pleading dissolved into babbling as Zheng did what I suspect she'd first been designed for. The grin spread on her face as she opened her jaw, wider and wider, taking each step toward him with slow purpose. Her tongue lolled out of her mouth, inch after obscene inch, fat and thick and wet, extending far below her chin. The man cringed, closing his eyes and trying to press himself back from her without choking himself on the rope around his neck. Zheng. I snapped. The tongue whipped back into her mouth, and she turned to regard me, oddly neutral. I had the sudden and unmistakable feeling of getting between a dog and its food. What are you doing? You want to know where your lover is? She asked. Yes, of course I do, but don't. Do you have a better suggestion? She took the final step toward the terrified man, and grasped his chin in one huge meaty fist, ignoring me once more. First I will take one of your eyes, she hissed. Then a hand. Which do you use to wipe your arse, worm? Zheng only did her thing for a few seconds, but it made my stomach turn and my blood run cold. She slid up close to the shaking, cowering cultist, her hot breath in his face, hissing something between her teeth about how he had to open his eyes, an obscenity I will not repeat here because I don't wish to think about it ever again. Her teeth in his face, her frame radiating animal threat and lust and hunger all at once. She was going to eat him. She wanted to eat him, every cell in her body screamed it out loud. He was crying, panting, babbling denials, when her tongue extended again, a rough tentacle crawling up the side of his face, daring him to close his eyelids. Actually, I managed to say out loud, "Yes." She stopped. The tongue whipped back into her head again. She didn't look at me. "Yes. Yes, I have a better suggestion," I said. My voice shook, but I got the words out. Zheng tilted her head one way, then the other, a low hiss of frustration in her throat. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm going to politely request that you not eat parts of that man. Please." Zheng sighed, shrugged, and let him go. The cultist Jacob looked at me like I was an angel. I glared back. "I'm not saving you from her," I said, only half a lie. "I've got an ultimatum." Anything, they just pay me," he said. "I'm hired to watch the room, I dash." "I don't believe that," I said. Zheng grinned. "But it doesn't matter," I continued. "I assume you're not a mage, at least, or Zheng would have pulled your head off by now." The zombie grunted. "Well, believe it or not, I'm worse than her. I can do a lot worse than kill you or torture you." I managed to get to my feet, hugging one of the blankets around my shoulders. I felt wobbly and ill, a hollow pain inside my chest, bones fragile as fine porcelain. "Do you know who I am? Tell me the truth, or or Zheng will eat one of your eyeballs." Had to swallow, to keep the bile down. He glanced at Zheng, then back at me, feet adjusting to keep the rope from closing his windpipe, and nodded once. "Then you know what I can do," I said. "I will send you to meet your new god, the Eye, whatever you people call it now. I will send you there, and you will not come back, unless you tell me what I want to know." A horrible realization dawned on his face. Zheng had terrified him, but the prospect of meeting his god sent claws of soul horror raking across his beaten mind. His face went gray and his jaw went slack. "I don't dash," he choked out. "Don't is not the word I want to hear," I managed. Deep down in the back of my mind I felt like a monster, like something hatching from a misshapen shell, but I would do anything to find Rain. "I don't know," he almost screamed. "I don't know where they took the other girl, I swear. I swear, oh God, please no, I swear, I dash. You must know, or you're going to meet your God." His eyes darted back and forth, sweat on his brow, shaking all over. Then he tried to kill himself. He did a little hop on one foot and kicked his own legs out from under him, the rope snapped taut with his weight, and almost snapped his neck. Luckily for all of us, Zheng had seen this coming. She moved like greased lightning, and hit about as hard, grabbing the ropes that ran from the cultist's wrists and under his groin in the split second before his entire body weight slammed through his spine. Instead of breaking his neck he jerked and writhed, choking for air, squealing like a stuck pig. Zheng reached up and unhooked the top rope from the curtain rail, and poor Jacob crashed to the floor in a sobbing, retching heap. I stared, numb, lost for a moment, trying and failing to convince myself he had deserved that. My threat had made a man want to die. "So eager to leave this mortal coil, monkey?" Zheng rumbled down at him, grabbing a handful of his hair. "At least let me do it for you." "All right," I snapped out, before Zheng could pick him up and eat his fingers. "All right, I believe you, you don't know where Rain is." The cultist nodded, clutching at his bruised throat, trying to squeeze himself away from Zheng. His eyes found me like a drowning man clutching for a piece of driftwood. "But you're going to tell me every place your cult has, every place she might be. Addresses, details, any dash." He didn't take much convincing. I suspect he was broken long before Zheng tied him to that curtain rail. As he babbled out a trio of targets, a place on the riverfront, an old pub out west I'd never heard of, a suburban address he swore was Sarika's, he broke down slowly, all energy fleeing his body until Zheng finally let go of his hair and he curled up on himself like a wounded insect. He slowed, words deadened, eyes drained of vitality. "That's all. Just those 3 places. He nodded. Those are the only ones I know. I know they took another girl, I don't know who, I never saw. If I had, I would I never agreed with. He trailed off at the look on my face. Whatever you have to tell yourself, I said quietly. You're not worth killing. She's not going to kill you, Grin corrected me. The man flinched, but that was all. The horror of the eye had drained the life from him. He'd given up. Grin tooted, unimpressed with the lack of reaction. What about Preem? Where is she? I asked. Tink. A clink of metal on glass, a fragment of gravel on a window, too faint to notice beyond the subconscious. Who? What? The cultist blinked at me. The zombie. Who came here last night? Sarika told me you people captured her too, unless that was another bluff. She's my friend, where is she? Blink blink. Incomprehension. Last night? Oh, you mean that. He nodded past me at the floor, and for a moment I thought he was being funny or we'd pushed him so far he'd lost his mind. He was nodding at the bundle of clothes and polished wood. A sick pressure mounted in my chest. I took a shaking step toward what resolved itself as a splayed figure, wrapped in a pair of ugly cargo trousers and a big puffy coat. The boots. I recognized the boots, I'd seen them so many times before. Another step and I fell to my knees, shaking my head. Reached out with one hand, but stopped, confused. To touch would be only further desecration. Shaman. Grin purred. It's her, I managed. A wooden mannequin, ball-jointed, of the kind only found in the most expensive and exclusive boutiques or the workshops of fashion designers. Evelyn had spared no expense in making Preem, but the wood had been warped by the effects of Preem's inhabitation. Little spars and anchor spikes jutted from the limbs, threads like a nervous system or frozen blood vessels lay just below the surface, and many of the joints had been added to with sheaths of wooden sinew or strange adjustments to their ranges of motion. The head was a blank oval, the wood grain twisted in impossible ways. I shouldn't be seeing this. It was like looking at a friend's bones. Preem. I whispered. Tink. Only in the silence of impending grief did I hear the little clink of metal on glass. I cast about with sudden wild hope. Preem. Clink. Clink clink. Ah, Grin purred, and pointed at the magic circle, at the empty bottle standing within. Found her. Careless of the danger, stupid and rash, I scrambled over to the magic circle on freezing feet and scooped the bottle up in shaking hands. A cork filled the neck, trapping a piece of fishing line so it dangled down inside the glass enclosure. A bead of lead, like a fishing weight, hung at the end of the line. Inside the glass, I could see the faintest suggestion of a rainbow discoloration shifting and curling, like oil on water transmuted into the slimmest wisp of smoke. It's Dash, Jacob spoke up. I stared at him with too much anger and steel, made him flinch and cringe. Right then I wanted to murder him. I wanted to get my hands on the person responsible for this and slap them. This is an obscenity, I hissed at him. Grin snorted mean-spirited laughter. Got herself corked. I whirled on her and, without meaning to, vented cold anger at the target she'd presented. Don't you dare laugh. You were like this, an hour ago. You were as good as in a bottle. She blinked once, and lowered her head to me in acknowledgement. It's one tap for yes, two for no, Jacob stammered out, nodding at the bottle. I turned back to it, shaking my head in denial. Preem. I whispered. The piece of lead jumped, as if caught in a breeze, and clinked against the side of the bottle. Tink. It's alright, Preem, I've got you. It's going to be alright, you'll be alright. Meaningless reassurances, spoken to a near-invisible wisp of oily rainbow smoke trapped inside a glass bottle. Tink, went Preem's lead weight against the glass. One for yes. One for yes Heather, I trust you, you'll save me, you'll get me out of here, won't you? One for I'm helpless and tiny and vulnerable, my strength stolen and my flesh banished. One for please, don't leave me here. A veil of red descended inside me, along with a shaking that had nothing to do with the cold, my jaw tight and my breath coming fast and hot. I turned to the cultist Jacob, still hunched on the floor with his hands bound. How do I put my friend back in her body? I hissed through clenched teeth. I don't know, I'm not trained. It's not my, he trailed off when he saw the anger boiling behind my eyes. If the bottle in my hands hadn't contained Preem's soul, I would have smashed it across his head. I bit my lips and swallowed too hard, struggling to find an outlet for this awful rage. I felt rather than saw Zheng's grin, the shark-toothed smile in my peripheral vision. She reached down and took the end of Jacob's rope, dragged the cultist to his feet, and pulled him close. One of her hands encircled the top of his head to hold him immobile. Looks like the shaman is angry, she hissed in the man's ear. Dangerous when she's angry, a large bite for such a small jaw. Her huge tongue slid out of her mouth in silent threat, a wet pink tentacle that made my heart squeeze. Jacob cringed away, his eyes pleading with me for relief. And you can stop with the theatrics, I snapped, too angry to care about Zheng's sadistic needs. The tongue whipped back inside her mouth and slowly she turned to regard me. I ignored her, thrusting Preem's bottle at the cultist. Did you have anything at all to do with this violation? Did you? A tiny part of my mind, trying to calculate and analyze even now, noted that the lead weight inside didn't swing as I moved the bottle. External force was cancelled out, only Preem's spirit could affect the line and the attached weight. No. No, I don't know how to. He pleaded. Really, I can't, it was Dash. Did he? I asked the bottle asked Preem. Clink click. 2 for no. Lucky you, Zheng growled into his face and he squeezed his eyes shut. Preem, I'll get you out, I promise. I promise, I told the bottle. Tink, the little lead weight jumped. The oil-on smoke wisp curled about itself, impossible false colors shifting and turning, glowing faint as a daylight moon. You can hear me, yes? You can hear everything I say to you? Tink. What about other people, you can hear them? Things happening beyond the bottle? Tink. Can you see? I waved a hand in front of the glass. No response. The lead weight didn't move. When they were up, Zheng growled in a slow, sing-song voice. And when they were down, they were down. And when they were only halfway up they were neither up nor down. I boggled at her. Halfway up. She pointed a finger at the bottle. Meat senses aren't the same. Yes, thank you so much for the metaphor. Do you know how to put Preem back in her body? Zheng shrugged, a performance of disinterest. There should be Dash, Jacob started. There should be a way, to get it out, I mean. Marcus was saying things like, telling her she'd be free if she answered, he was asking her questions about you, the say girl, all sorts. Really, real talk, he was interrogating her, offering her a way out. He would know, Marcus would know. It's him you want. Zheng let out a growl of laughter. Marcus put her in this bottle? I asked, and he nodded. Preem. I asked her. Clink. And Marcus had died a violent and painful death. Why didn't that make me feel any better? Because Preem was still trapped in the bottle. I swore, worse than I'd ever swore before, a short train of vile words borrowed mostly from Evelyn, culminating in a choice scatological paradox. In a way I was glad only the demons were here to witness that. I know where he lives, Jacob hurried on. I think. Or Sarika might. If you make him show you how Dash. He's dead, I said. Oh. I ate him, Zheng purred, a nasty grin spreading across her mouth. I don't hear. Jacob blurted out. You should call Sarika. Take my mobile, it's in my back pocket, her number is on there. She and Marcus, they both know how to do things like that. Zheng hitched an eyebrow, turned our captive around with a shove, and extracted a mobile phone from the back pocket of his jeans. He babbled something inane about how we could keep it. Thank you, Zheng. I held out one hand but Zheng held on to the phone. She watched my eyes with the slow judgment of a predatory reptile. At any other time that look would have reduced me to pudding, but my indignant rage ran too deep and too hot right now to be quenched by even a 7-foot-tall Amazonian goddess. What now? I snapped. You need allies, yes, but this one comes at a high cost, she purred. Her eyes indicated the bottle in my arms. I squinted at her like she was an idiot. Preem is my friend, not an ally. You can eat me before I'd leave her behind. Really? Kill me then. Jin growled, exasperated or unimpressed or merely thinking, it was hard to tell. What can she do that I can't? Clink clink. Tink, went the lead weight inside Preem's bottle. Tink tink. Practically a tantrum. We absolutely do not have time for a demonic territorial pissing contest, I said. Please, Zheng, give me the phone. Time, exactly, Zheng growled. You make this phone call, and Sarika I shit on her name will move against you. She's sharper than her predecessor. Less mad. And? Do you have a plan, little shaman? I shook my head, bewildered. For what? Talking to Sarika? Zheng shrugged, sullen and watchful. I opened my mouth to say no, of course I didn't have a bloody plan. To tell the giant zombie that a plan didn't matter. Hot anger and inner cold and intense worry ate at my mind. I had to get Preem back into her body, or out of here. I had to find Rain, get home and make sure my friends were safe. A plan? Sod plans. I was ready to scream threats down the phone at Sarika until she gave me what I wanted. The only answer was act. Zheng hadn't been allowed to make plans of her own for a very long time indeed. A slave, always forced into other people's designs. Watching monsters like Alexander Lilban stumble and crash, good intentions leading to hell and worse. All her former masters were dead. Now she was free, she could choose to have none. She was also correct, I was exhausted, worn out, and now blind with anger. Her approval was a tightrope. All right, I said and left. I left Zheng and the sad, defeated cultist together by the radiator, the last thing either of them expected me to do. Cradling Preem's bottle gently in my arms, I padded back over to the beach chairs and settled the bottle in one of them, so it couldn't be knocked over by accident. I had no idea what smashing the glass or popping the cork might do, and I didn't want to take that risk yet. I regained the filthy but warm blankets, pulled them around my shoulders, and shuffled over to the tote box full of bottled water and emergency cereal bars. Not the most appetizing, but I took two, and another bottle of water to wash it all down. Then I got myself settled in a chair, folded my legs to keep my feet warm, and commenced eating. Zheng leveled a slow stare at me. Jacob seemed confused too, slack-jawed. What? I said after a swallow, and held up one of the cereal bars. Peanut and chocolate, not bad but not terrible. Would you like one? What are you doing, Shaman? Zheng purred. Getting more protein, like you suggested. One can't make a good plan on an empty stomach. Zheng snorted a laugh. Monkeys. This monkey needs to eat. I drank some water to drown the embers of my indignant rage. It sort of worked. Sitting still and going through the mechanical process of putting food in my mouth did drain away the hottest thoughts, give me a moment to pause and think, begin to scrape together the scraps of the plan Zheng demanded. I was in charge here, I was in control, this was my responsibility. At least that's what I told myself to stop anger decaying into panic. Zheng dropped Jacob's rope, and in lieu of tying him back to the curtain rail, she gave him a horrible silent grin instead, one that left no question as to what would happen if he dared try to escape. Even all the way on the other side of the room, I flinched as well, and the cultist cowered against the wall, curling up tighter. Jing grabbed a cereal bar from the box. With a dubious look on her face she peeled the wrapper, gave it an experimental sniff, and wrinkled her nose. "Not to your taste?" I asked. "No," she growled. She did pour a bottle of water down her throat, though not before crushing the cap with a twist of her hand. "Don't suppose you have any painkillers up here? Paracetamol, anything at all?" Jacob took a moment to realize I was speaking to him. He blinked several times and tentatively shook his head. I tooted and sighed. No longer cushioned by either sleep or anger, a splitting headache was brewing inside my skull, the product of dehydration or brain math or stress, who knew? I settled for drinking more water. Zheng wiped her mouth and squatted down on her haunches to watch me, which almost rendered me unable to eat. Like being observed by a hungry 600-pound tiger. "Before I freed you," I said to her. "You said you'd be mine," in the bold way. What does that mean? I'd expected a grin and a glib comment, perhaps a laugh. Instead, Jing shrugged, and a subtle discomfort crossed her features, a twitch or a tick akin to a suppressed wince at the pain from an old wound. "Means I'm still here." I nodded, let it drop. "Fair enough. Thank you." She grunted. "So what about you, do you have a plan?" I repeated her own question. "To get downstairs, past the corruption, as you called it?" Zheng looked over at the lead gray sky visible through the dirty glass in the room's windows. Sherrowford lay below, hidden by the wall. "Jump out the window?" Clink clink, Preem disagreed. "Right, I'll take that as a no then." I sighed, took a deep breath, and drew myself up. "But you know more about that than I do. You work on that part, getting us downstairs." Zheng raised an eyebrow. My turn to shrug. "I can't do everything on my own now, can I?" She grunted agreement, and her brow furrowed in thought. "I have 3 problems," I continued, letting it all flow out, the real plan assembling itself at high speed in the back of my head. 1. Getting out of here. 2. Putting Preem back in her body. 3. Finding Rain, my lover, and possibly Lozzie too, though the more I think about it the more I doubt she's anywhere near right now. 1 is your job. 2 and 3, well, I need to get home, find Evie, the others, but while we're here we have 2 options. Option 1, we could force him, I nodded toward Jacob, to call Sarika for us, lure her back here, but he could spoil the whole thing with a single word. If he wants his heart eaten. Or, I corrected her gently. They might have a code phrase to use in emergencies, which means we wouldn't even know. Clever. I'm going to go with option 2, which is more work and quite difficult, but may yield better results. Which is a series of threats and lies. I held out my hand for the phone again, and to my surprise it wasn't shaking. "Don't say a word while I call. Don't let them know you're free. That could be useful later." Zheng grinned in approval. She handed me the phone, and I did a pretty successful job of concealing my anxiety. I felt almost like Rain, competent and clever and quick, decisive and devious and well, no, not dashing. In my best moments I can almost manage cute, at the right angle and in the wrong light, but I will never be dashing. I hoped she would be proud of me, proud of this plan, proud of how strong I was trying to be. I hoped with all my heart I'd get to tell her about this. Sarika's number wasn't hard to find among the 24 Jacob had in his contacts list. He stayed silent and Zheng stayed squatting before me, as I placed the call. Sarika picked up on the 3rd ring. "What is it?" That same voice, thin and tight with bone-deep exhaustion. "Jacob?" "He's alive," I answered. "For now." A long pause, stretching out the seconds. I think she was trying to spook me, get me to break first and offer information by accident, but I harnessed my cold anger and my cold toes, lost myself in the numb sensations inside my body. Eventually, Sarika let out a big sigh down the phone. Got free in the end, did you? I'm going to find you. If you touch one hair on Rain's head, I'll do far worse than kill you. Rain. That's her name. She wouldn't tell me that. Thank you for that one, makes my job easier. I mock hesitated as I shot Jing a tiny, wavering smile of triumph. Sarika had taken my bait. They did have Rain, no question about that now. They knew of Evelyn, Kimberly had once been one of them, and they'd never be able to hold Twill but Rain. She'd give them nothing, not even her name. Let me speak to her. I didn't have to work hard to make myself sound nervous. Or what? You don't have any leverage. My leverage is that when I find you, I'll only kill you, instead of sending you to the eye. The best thing you can do right now is let my friend go. Drive her back to the house and let her go, and then there's a small chance that you can get out of Sherrowford before I and Say find you. Twill, that's the Brinkwood werewolf to you. I know she'll be after you already, and I doubt you want her to catch you. I heard Sarika cover the mouthpiece on her end, muffle a question beyond earshot. She came back to the phone and spoke quickly. How'd you get past Jing? Sent her outside. If she's not dead she will be soon. Marcus too. This time I didn't have to fake the hesitation. I glanced at Jing, and wondered what that grin really meant. What do you mean? I said. Jing winked at me. I stared back and shivered, and not in a good way. You're bluffing. I held my voice tight and steady. You wouldn't put Jing in a room with me and not expect me to get rid of her. I expected you knew better than that. That was the whole point. She was mutually assured destruction. I'm not a mage. The plan was running through my fingers. Had to think on my feet, think past the headache and the fear and the suspicion about Jing. What would Rain say? A bombastic threat, probably. What would Evelyn do? Get angry and call these people filth. What would I do? What should I do? Lie. I was good at lying. I'd lied to myself for 10 whole years. Let my friend go, I all but stammered. And I'll bring Jing back from outside and deliver her to you. A thinking silence, stinging sharp. Jing's grin twisted with sadistic mirth. She mouthed a phrase at me, one that contained the words eat, skin and Sarika's name. I nodded. Sarika finally spoke again. You'd have to provide first. Get us the zombie, then I'll think about letting your friend go. But what happens after that? We go our separate ways. No. The zombie for Rain, that's what you get. Or you say no and I send you all to meet the eye instead. Sarika sighed. Alright, but this Rain girl is our insurance now. You come after us before we get Jing, and we'll hurt her, got it? You dash, I almost snapped out the words, you started it, reduced us to the level of a playground fight. I know where you are, and I know how to find you. We were both bluffing now, playing both ends. Why threaten me with zombies if they would hurt Rain? I tried to think through the bluster, to predict the eye cult's real next move. Okay, deal, as long as you don't hurt her, I said, heart thumping, playing this out as far as I could. But listen, I'm going to need help. I heard the sneer in Sarika's voice. From Dash. Not from you. Don't be stupid. Preem, I found her. I swallowed a throat full of bile, and tried not to look at the warped wood mannequin splayed out on the floor, tried not to think of that as Preem's bones. The bottle. How do I get her out, put her back in her body? Tink went the lead weight in Preem's jar. I smiled at it, then recalled she probably couldn't see my face. Silence on the line. Sarika. I prompted. You're zombie. Just smash the bottle, that should work. Smash the bottle. I repeated. Zheng bared her shark's teeth and shook her head. Tink tink went preem, 2 for no. Yes, smash the bottle near the vessel she arrived in, Sarika repeated. It didn't take a master of deception to know not to trust her. She rushed her words and spoke them flat. A bad lie. A naked lie. Which meant the fake deal was already so much rubbish. Zheng held her hand out for the phone. She whispered at me, silk rustling through fire. You've lost, Shaman. My turn. I hesitated, a mistake. Zheng surged up from her squatting position, a mountain of muscle in motion, and plucked the phone from my grasp. Her other hand gently gripped my head for a moment, a warning love bite from a warhound, then let me go. She stood tall and lifted the phone to her ear. Sarika, she purred. Sarika. Guess who? Then she laughed, long and low, bowel quaking and chest constricting. When she lowered the phone again, the line was dead. Zheng. I almost screamed at her. I'd gotten her to agree. To not hurt, I trailed off at Zheng's raised eyebrow, and forced down a shuddering breath. Impressive how much this inhuman zombie could communicate with mere expression. She was lying, I said. Of course. Yes, she was lying, yes, I said, trying to convince myself as much as agree with Zheng. She would still hurt Rain if she needed to, she knew the deal meant nothing. Now she knows you're free, she'll be more cautious, she'll be afraid. Shitting herself, Zheng growled with obvious pleasure, and dropped the phone back into my lap. Yes. Good move. Yes. She might think if she hurts Rain, I'll let you eat her. Or something along those lines. You think that's why I did it? I just wanted to make her scream. Zheng grinned, wide and mocking. I stared at the zombie for a second, trying to figure out if that was sarcasm or something much darker. Had Sarika been telling the truth about Zheng? What exactly was this demon-possessed corpse capable of, that had made Sarika so worried? Could I trust Zheng? Trust, maybe not, but I didn't have a lot of choice right now, no other friends and no support, and even if I wanted to go it alone from here, I doubt very much I could have made Zheng leave. She must have caught the incredulous curiosity on my face, because she grunted and pointed at the phone. Why not call your friends now? I can't. I sighed and let the phone flop against my leg. I'm terrible at memorizing numbers. I can't even remember Rain's number, not off the top of my head. I could call my mother at home, I guess. I still remember my home's landline number. But that's not going to help. Sarika's clever, you know, the cultist said. I turned to look at Jacob, surprised he'd spoken up. Zheng just growled, but to my surprise he kept talking, still rubbing his throat where he'd almost strangled himself earlier, sparing Zheng only a flicker of attention before he focused on me again. She's kept us alive, since he tapped the side of his head with one blunt paw of a hand. She's kept us together, given us something to work towards. Stopped us from killing ourselves. Most of us. Look, I don't have anything against you, I don't even really care, but I can't live with this in my head. A solution to that can be provided, Zheng rumbled. She didn't bother to look at him. The eye, I said. If that's what you call it. Jacob nodded. A terrible notion wormed into my mind, a suspicion I hadn't the time or energy to consider until now. You dream about it, yes? That's correct. He nodded, half shrugged. Does it? The words caught in my throat. Does it teach you things? Mathematics? What? He blinked at me. No, nothing like that. It wants things. It doesn't speak, it doesn't do anything, it just is. It is, all the time, behind the dash. He groped and gestured helplessly at the air, face contorting with the effort of expressing the ineffable. Behind the fabric of reality. Whatever deal Alexander Lilban had struck with the eye, He'd given it a pipeline to these people's minds, but it wasn't using them in the same way it had spent a decade tormenting me. Why? Why not hand them the same tools it had given to me? Why not take one of them to Wonderland instead? Stop. Stop, I said. I know what you mean. Look, here. Not sure why I was doing it, I rolled back my left sleeve to expose the thick black lines of the fractal. Rain and I had last refreshed it a week ago, a shared ritual I relished every time. I held it up to show the cultist, proud of the ink on my skin. Jing frowned and tilted her head at it too. This keeps the eye out of my nightmares. Do you have a pen? The cultist's face lit up with fragile hope, frowning, uncertain as he realized what I meant. He cast around for something to write with, settled on a black marker pen discarded near the magic circle at the back of the room. Still tied to the radiator, eyes asking permission, he reached out with a foot and hooked the pen toward himself. Make sure to get the angles correct, I said, as he furiously scribbled the fractal on his arm. Memorize it, write it down, I don't know. When he was finished he gripped his arm tight, staring at the design, then at me. Will it dash? I shrugged. I don't know. Good luck, I guess. You probably deserve to die, but maybe you don't deserve the eye. That's all. And don't thank me, ever. Monkeys, Jin grumbled. Sarika said she had more zombies. Is that true? I've never seen them, Jacob said. Yes, Jin purred. Nothing as old as me. Leftovers from the castle, a few months old at most. Closer to her, she nodded at Preem's jar. Clink clink went Preem's disagreement. Okay. Okay. I stood up, shed all but one of the blankets as a final defense to keep out the cold, and scooped up Preem's bottle. After a moment's thought I wrapped it in a blanket too, in a sort of protective sling. Briefly I considered trying to put her back into her body myself. Hyperdimensional mathematics could do anything in theory. In practice, I was capable of performing the magical equivalent of tying a sharp rock to the end of a stick. Returning Preem to her physical vessel would be more like restarting a nuclear reactor. I have to get her home, I said to Zheng. To Evie. She'll know what to do. I can't carry all of her. I allowed myself a lingering glance at the grotesque and beautiful sight of Preem's altered wooden bones. Inside it. I did, to my credit, successfully resist the urge to scream. I bit down on my lips. Ducking, squeezing, making myself small, trying to hold my breath in silence as the tentacles probed and tasted the air it worked. For once in my life, being tiny and scrawny helped me survive, because the tentacles couldn't see. They groped blind. I crammed myself as tiny I could get, heart hammering, holding on tight to Preem's vulnerable, breakable jar, untouched. Zheng wasn't so lucky. Too big, too unwieldy. She gritted her teeth in naked frustration, 7 foot of muscle too large to hide amid the reaching feelers. She dodged and twisted, tried to step between them, and failed. I stared, helplessly, too scared to even whisper, as one of the tentacles caught her arm. A brush, the merest touch on her coat's sleeve, and the slick wet tentacle shot forward to wrap around her arm. Every other tentacle went berserk, straining toward her, whipping for her face and feet. In a second 3 more had her, then 6, then 10, then a dozen. In moments they had both of her legs, her throat, her ribcage. Zheng fought like a titan, pulling and ripping, digging in her heels, roaring like a goated lion. She dropped Preem's wooden body to the floor with a clatter, but the tentacles ignored it, ignored me as I put a hand to my mouth, ignored everything but constricting the giant zombie woman like a dozen pythons. She pulled tentacles apart with sheer force, tore handfuls of concrete out of the floor as they dragged her along it, toward the wall. The wall slopped open like a mouth. Toothless and wet, gaping and dark, from floor to ceiling. Zheng. I couldn't stop myself now. Luckily the tentacles were too focused on the difficulty of reeling her in. What do I do? Stay still, she shouted. What was plan A? This, she managed to roar, and then tentacles of concrete closed over her mouth and covered her eyes, and heaved her into the obscene wall mouth. The wall closed like poured concrete, slurping and slapping and then going still, as if the mouth had never been there. Glasswick Tower swallowed Zheng whole. Silence fell, broken only by my racing heartbeat. The concrete tentacles calmed, but didn't retract. Their purpose now fulfilled, they waved lazily in the air. Hand to my mouth, tears on my cheeks, I clenched my jaw and forced myself not to panic. A single mistake, a single misstep, a single sound could end my life. I hugged Preem's jar close to my chest as if to hide her. Zheng. I mouthed in silence. The nearest tentacle twitched ever so slightly, and I quashed the urge to speak. No, Zheng. Between the spot I stood and the next landing, 24 tentacles dotted the floor and walls. More waved in the gloomy stairwell below. No choice, no way back. I had to protect Preem, and I had to get out of here. Her body was unrecoverable now. Even well and whole I couldn't have dragged all that would down Glasswick Tower without making a sound. I took the first careful step, threading my way between the tentacles, cringing and shaking, a sob held tight in my throat. The urge to run was almost unbearable. The air I displaced betrayed my presence. The nearby tentacles twitched toward me, exploring and groping. A scream clawed up in my throat. A scream echoed by a roar. Zheng burst out of the wall. In a shower of concrete and dust, 7 feet of avenging god exploded through rock and rebar like it was paper. Bleeding thick red from a score of cuts, covered in fragments of concrete, her coat and t-shirt torn, she slammed back into the stairwell like a tank shell. She spat a mouthful of crushed concrete and a savage grin tore across her face. Blinking, coughing, half-blinded by rock dust, I saw the tentacles react with panic, rushing to close the hole in the wall, whipping and lashing over the gap like a wound. In one swift motion, Zheng scooped Preem's wooden body off the floor and hauled it over her shoulder, then took 2 steps forward past me and kicked the glass out of the nearest window, her boot sweeping the shards aside and smashing the frame open to the cold air. What dash was all I had time to say before she swept me up too. Over her shoulder in a fireman's carry, one arm pinning my rump. No, no. Zheng, no. I screamed as I figured out what she was about to do. Zheng laughed, loud and exuberant and utterly bonkers. The tentacles were writhing back toward us, snaking for Zheng's ankles and my face as she climbed through the window. She braced herself against the slim foothold of the exterior windowsill, as the clean air ruffled my hair and whipped out her trench coat. I twisted, half to look and half in an animal instinct attempt to wriggle out of her grip. My head whirled at the view below. So very far below. A wave of vertigo sent my stomach flopping end over end and turned my legs to jelly. Plan A was always jump, Shaman. Zheng roared. And jump she did. Falling out of a high-rise tower block is a rare experience, but then so is having your toenails pulled out, or being attacked by a polar bear. Placing little value in this terminal lesson, I decided to close my eyes and forego the once-in-a-lifetime sight of the earth rushing toward me from 25 stories up. Well, no, that's a lie. I didn't decide to close my eyes. I screwed them shut because falling out of a building is terrifying. Clinging to Zheng with one arm and clutching Preem's soul bottle with the other, with the wind whipping past my ears and whipping Zheng's coat into my face, with Preem's wooden bones rattling, and out of breath with which to scream, that fall took a lifetime. An adrenaline junkie's dream, to be certain, but not one of mine. Free fall was not fun or exciting, because I was convinced that I had put my life in the hands of a suicidal demon, and I was about to die. Over the sound of Zheng's mad laughter, my brain groped in panic for a relevant equation. Later, much later, weeks later, with the terror safely behind me, I actually sat down and calculated how long that fall took. About 5 seconds, give or take the effect of Zheng's coat on wind resistance, and how much Preem weighed without her pneumosomatic flesh. 5 seconds. Not enough time to dredge for hyperdimensional mathematics when I didn't even know what I was looking for. Hitting the ground knocked the wind out of me, forced a gut-deep poof from my lungs, and bruised my stomach muscles for days afterward. A loud crack, a softer crunch, a moment of shock and sudden stillness. Shaking all over, clutching both Zheng's flesh and Preem's bottle in a death grip, I found that I was still alive. Still held over Zheng's shoulder, her arm an iron-hard restraint over my hindquarters. With no little difficulty I got my eyes open. I must have said something akin to "put me down," because Zheng dutifully planted me back on my feet. Of course I fell over onto my arse right away, because my legs' muscles now consisted entirely of custard. I did, however, not drop Preem's bottle. Panting, dizzy, apparently with nothing broken, I couldn't get any words out. Luckily I'd had my head at the right angle when we'd landed, or whiplash would have broken my spine. Zheng straightened up. I heard several distinct cracking, crunching sounds from her legs. She'd stopped laughing, but wore a triumphant grin. Her feet had made a sort of dent in the ground, embedded into the compacted dirt by several inches. She'd absorbed the impact. I just shook my head at her. We'd come down on the rear side of Glasswick Tower, in a bit of scrub ground that had once been a common green area, now a mass of weed trying to climb the graffiti-caked concrete, inside an old metal security fence that was supposed to block access to the lowest level of residential windows. Some old raggedy bushes and an electrical junction box hid us from the little-used, run-down road along the rear of Headley Council Estate. Out of the tower. Mercifully, beautifully free, under the open skies of Sherrowford. With company. His eyes like saucers, mouth hanging open as if we'd fallen out of the sky. Which, to be fair, we had. We were also both covered in blood, carrying a stripped wooden mannequin and a huge faintly glowing bottle. And Zheng was 7 feet tall, can't forget that. The spray can he'd been using dropped out of his hand, and a wad of chewing gum fell out of his mouth. I swallowed, coughed, made sure my voice worked, and said the first thing that came to mind. "Shouldn't you be in school?" I asked. I'm bunking off," he managed. "That's not good. You'll get in trouble." "Stay in school, yes." "Boo," Zheng rumbled. He nodded once, backed up several paces, and ran away. Sensible lad. In a minor miracle of grip strength, I'd managed to hang onto the filthy blanket during our rapid descent from Glasswick Tower. Which was lucky, because a January morning in Sherrowford was no place to be out of doors dressed in only one's pajamas. We should, I mumbled. "We should, yes." Bloodstream still awash with the receding floodwaters from a tidal wave of adrenaline, I attempted to get to my feet and discovered my bruises. Ah! I winced. Ah, oh God, okay. Ow. Ow, my stomach. I bit my bottom lip and squeezed my eyes shut. Our landing had tenderized my abdominal muscles. How was it possible to be this bruised without breaking any bones? I sat very still, breathing very gently. "Best I could do," Zheng rumbled. She still grinned with success, but had her head tilted to one side, as if listening to a distant sound on the air. "No, it's fine," I said. "I'm alive. That's what counts. That counts." "Ting," agreed Preem, the lead weight jumping inside her bottle. I felt a bizarre urge to press my face against the glass. I spent a good minute figuring out how to stand up without using my stomach muscles or dropping Preem's bottle. In the end I had to put her down, turn over and use my hands to lever myself off the ground, then tucked Preem back into the crook of my arm underneath the blanket around my shoulders. "How am I not concussed?" I said, blinking hard at my own left hand. "Am I concussed? I should absolutely have a concussion." Clink clink. Preem didn't think so. "I paid the meat price," Zheng purred. She didn't bother to look at me. Her meaning failed to penetrate my adrenaline-addled brain. I touched the back of my neck as if expecting to find protruding bone, gingerly rotated my head on my shoulders, swallowed and blinked and searched for damage. Shouldn't I have whiplash? That was like a car crash. I am smarter than a seatbelt. I nodded automatically. As the adrenaline drained away, my teeth threatened to chatter. We should go, we should really go. We can't stay here. Should, Zheng echoed. That boy might alert somebody. Parents, police, I don't know. And Sarika could be on her way, she said she was coming here. We'll need to keep out of sight, both of us. How do we do that? We can hardly take the bus. I spoke more to myself than Zheng, trying to marshal my thoughts and reboot my brain after the fall. If somebody spotted us falling, well, we'll make the strange and unexplained news. I don't know how we're going to get home without being seen. What is it? Zheng had turned her shark-toothed grin on me as I rambled on. Zheng. We really should go, we need to leave before dash. Should and could. Different things. I'm sorry. 7 fractures. Zheng tapped her left thigh, then her right. 4 fractures. Her finger rose to the wide swell of her hips inside her jeans, to her pelvis. 2 fractures. 1 in my spine as well. Structural. I take a step, I fall down. Oh. Suddenly the cracking sounds I'd heard earlier made sense. Iron and rock she may seem, but even demon-altered corpse-born flesh and blood was still only flesh and blood. Oh Zheng, I'm sorry. You, for me. Thank you. I dash. I'm fixing it. Zheng shrugged, rattling Preem's wooden body on her shoulder. How long will healing take? I asked. Sarika might be on her way here. And, well, people might see us. I glanced around at the thin barrier of old bushes and partially dismantled security fence, the twin concrete cliffs of Gleeston and Glasswick towers looming over us. Nobody had chanced by yet, but it was only a matter of time. You look like you stepped out of a Greek myth. Plus we've got quite a bit of red on us. 15 minutes, give or take. Bones need time. Zheng shrugged again. Don't run off alone. Believe you me, I am not going anywhere. I tugged the blanket tighter around my shoulders and adjusted Preem's bottle. The road beyond the secluded patch of scrub ground was deserted for now, the gap between the towers hostile with graffiti and broken bottles, but it would only take one passerby to glance down here at the wrong moment, one stay-at-home mom in Gleeston Tower to look out of her bathroom window, and we'd be the subject of a very bizarre phone call to the police. Headley Council Estate might be numb to vandalism and pretty drug crime, but I doubt they'd shrug off the sight of a 7-foot-tall monster covered in dried blood and concrete dust, accompanying a shell-shocked college girl in her pajamas. But despite what I'd said, I didn't care. Perhaps it was the adrenaline, or the joy of not being dead, or the sheer madness of surviving a 25-story fall, but for once in my life I simply couldn't bring myself to give a damn. I filled my lungs with frigid air, and didn't care how much it made me shiver. I was alive and I was free, and my bruises would heal. My only witness other than Zheng, her eyes tilted to the sky, her attention focused inward, was the omnipresent spirit life, the pneumosomatic background noise to my life. From where we stood on that half-hidden patch of scrub ground I could already see a dozen different spirits, a blob of tentacles and orange suckers climbed Gleeston Tower, a clump of creatures all stalk and I picked their way across distant rooftops, a rock-sized bird of black fire hovered low over the city to the east and a pair of hound ghoul things snuffled down the nearby road, barely 30 feet away. An idea struck me, one I would never have dared 15 minutes ago. That was the old Heather, who had not yet survived death with her eyes wide open. Well, eyes screwed shut in terror. Still counted. Zheng, I dash. You feel invincible, Zheng said before I could finish. She lowered her eyes to meet mine. Maybe you are. How did you know that? Go out in a storm. Zheng's voice dropped low and quiet, a tiger purr in the night. Naked and alone, and climb to the highest point you can find. The trees shake, the rocks shiver. But you shout back at the thunder and the lightning, defy the gods to kill you. Maybe they do, maybe you die. But if you live, you're invincible. That's how your kind do it. The old way. She took a deep breath and her grin broke the spell. Or it's just how you monkeys get when you cheat death. Endorphins. Yes, probably that second one. I took a deep breath as well. It's hard to explain, I'm going to take a risk. Please trust me for a moment. Zheng shrugged. Couldn't help but notice she kept her legs and hips and spine rock steady as she moved. The two spirits nosing at the road hadn't moved too far along yet. I wet my lips, wrapped myself in false courage, and opened my mouth. You, I said in a level voice, far too quiet to carry from our hiding place. One of the spirits looked up at me. Goat-like eyes in a pale lupin face. Its companions stopped too, and they stared at me like a pair of wolves examining a baited trap. Come here, I said. Or don't. Your choice. A hesitating first step turned into a trot, and the pair of spirits edged up toward the patch of scrub ground, pacing back and forth. Supremely ugly, a unnatural combination of wolf and ape, leathery hands instead of paws and scraggly fur like old man's hair sprouting in clumps on their rubbery skin. Big loose jaws full of blunt teeth worked silently on empty air. Eyes too large and too far apart kept sliding over at Zheng, unwilling to venture within her range. That's right, I'd seen her pick Tenny up by the throat once before, hadn't I? And Preem had wrestled that spirit at the Say estate. Demons could touch them, hurt them, and they knew it. You know who I am, or what I am. I raised my voice slightly and reminded myself I'd done this before, I'd spoken to spirits, I'd pressed them for information, I'd even commanded them briefly. This was unlikely to work, but I had nothing to lose by trying. I have a task for you. Pacing, back and forth, back and forth. No indication they cared. There's a magician approaching this tower, a mage, understand? She'll be here soon, and she might go up inside the tower. Follow her when she emerges again, follow her home. Then come back to me, and show me where she hides. Both spirits stopped, sat on their haunches, staring at me. A demand, a refusal. This wasn't working. In return what? I couldn't think of anything. Before I could get out another word, both spirits leapt up and ran off with a skidding and skittering of feet, nipping at each other's faces and hides. I puffed out a long sigh. A failure. I'd think of something else. I had to. Zheng was watching me with quiet fascination. I thought it was worth a go, I said. I can see, spirits, it's dash. Of course you can see them, Shaman. That word again. She'd called me that over and over since I'd freed her, but now she imbued the word with that awful reverence once more, a dark intensity in her eyes. I sighed to cover my discomfort. I do hope we didn't scar that boy too badly. Not to be rude, Zheng, but you're the sort of thing that causes recurring nightmares. Or wet dreams, if one was like me, but I didn't say that part out loud. Thank you. Zheng grinned in savage delight, back to normal. She rolled her neck and one shoulder, then twisted her torso and hips sideways in a slow motion that produced a machine gun sound of every spinal vertebrae popping in sequence. She coughed, flexed her thighs, bent a knee, went up on tiptoes, produced more popping noises as her joints realigned. She coughed again. Almost there. Minute, she grunted, coughed a third time, then opened her jaw wide and fished a chunk of concrete out the back of her throat. Ha! Zheng didn't strike me as remotely in need of what we mere mortals thought of as dignity, but I averted my gaze all the same. I looked up at Glasswick Tower, at the vertical dungeon we'd escaped, and tried to spot the window we'd jumped from. Couldn't see it from all the way down here, not at this angle. Did you know that would work? I muttered. Zheng grunted an interrogative, busy rotating her ankles. Jumping that far, I mean. Fallen further before, she rumbled. Carrying a person. 3 goats. She broke into a grin, enjoying the look on my face. Off a cliff. They lived too. Goats. Glad to know I'm in good company. Clink 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 went Preem. 3 times. Was that laughter? I frowned at the oily smoke in the bottle. They were good goats, Zheng said. Good meat. I'm certain they were, but I better not be. Clink, went Preem. Yes, thank you, I sighed, and stared up at the tower again. The corruption, the tentacles, the imprint of Alexander Lilburn's mind, none of it was visible from the ground. Nobody knew it was there, except for me and my friends, and a bunch of cultists dedicated to my worst enemy. Zheng took several steps, rolled her torso around in an arc from her hips and drew herself up to her full height, swapping Preem's wooden body from one shoulder to the other. She stretched, a tiger preparing to sun itself. Ha! Much better. I'll be back for you, I whispered to the tower, hugged Preem's jar, and turned to Zheng with a question on my lips. Shaman. Zheng. Are you? I cursed my hesitation. Zheng was a demon and a monster, but I couldn't think of a better way to phrase the question. Are you certain you're coming with me? My legs work again. Bones, she grunted amused disapproval. No, I mean, are you comfortable coming home with me? She purred, watching me carefully. The house my home, it belongs to Evelyn. She's my best friend, I love her, but she's a mage. I understand if you'd rather not go there. You don't owe me anything. I'm pretty sure I can get home on my own if I have to. If this is where we part ways. Zheng shrugged. I'm still here, Shaman. Walking all the way home took almost 3 hours. Zheng and I stuck to less used roads, back alleys, side streets, with much stopping and starting, on a circuitous route to avoid the city center, the shops, the homeless camps under the motorway, anywhere with people. Peering around corners, listening for footsteps, lurking in back alleys, a painstaking trek through the concrete jungle, all the way to the other side of Sherrowford. My fears were proved justified a couple of weeks later. A grainy picture of Zheng and I surfaced on the internet, snapped from the window of a passing car with a shaking phone camera, along the motorway embankment near one of the clusters of tents. Nothing visible to recognize me by, only the back of my head atop a shapeless lump of blanket, but Zheng was clearly far too tall. Supernatural sighting or trick of perspective? Photoshop or clever stunt? Luckily enough, the responses to the photograph descended into jokes about giant Yorkshiremen escaped from the moors. I'm certain some amateur paranormal researcher has glanced at my awful matted hair and hunched shoulders, and wondered about some obscure species of northern English gremlin. My unshod feet plagued me, sore and hobbling after the first hour, one sockless soft sole bleeding by the third, so Zheng picked me up and carried me. Princess style. Twice. An experience my body didn't forget in a hurry. She carried me until I could walk again, and I didn't reject the help, despite the quasi-sexual discomfort and Preem's fleshless wooden bones bumping alongside me. Rain needed all the help I could get. From any quarter, any monster. By the time number 12, Barnslow Drive finally hove into view, I was back on my own 2 feet, ready to drop, dehydrated, and shivering with cold. Home, this cracked and weathered red brick leviathan, roof tiles patched with tarpaulin. Wreathed in shriveled ivy for the winter, squinted at me from dark windows and made my heart soar. I hurried the final stretch, feet stinging, bruised abdomen complaining, and pushed through the garden gate with an unbidden smile on my lips. Preem didn't say anything from within her bottle, and perhaps it was only my imagination, but I swore I felt her respond as well. This was the place she'd come into our reality. Her home too. This one. Zheng purred from behind. In my moment of relief, I missed the warning note in her voice. Yes, I sighed. Yes, we're home. And not a thing out of place. I stopped on the garden path and bit my bottom lip. Front door intact and sturdy, not smashed in as I'd half expected. Rain's battered old car still squatted next to the pavement a few feet down the road, where she'd last left it parked. No lights showed around the cracks in curtains, all was dark and quiet under the brooding winter sky. The inside of the house sometimes felt like a cocoon or a womb, sealed and guarded from the city beyond. Question is, I murmured. Who exactly is at home? Click, agreed Preem. I finally tore my eyes from the house to glance back at Zheng, and realized she hadn't crossed the threshold of the front gate. Spirit life lurked in the street behind her, at a respectful distance. All the way here the pneumosomatic wildlife had given us a wide berth, as if Zheng was one of their natural predators. One of them barred from the Say house as they were. Zheng, you can come inside, can't you? I didn't think to mention, the property's warded. I actually don't know what that means, but can you? Signs won't stop flesh, she rumbled, and stepped through the invisible barrier, stalking up alongside me like a panther, without once wavering from her staring contest with the house. She watched the building with a slow, wary regard, tilting her head one way then the other, as if getting a good view through each separate eyeball. What's wrong? My words emerged as a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again. Zheng, what's wrong? You're spooking me. Do you see somebody? Slowly, she shook her head. I see this place. Not so different to the tower we ran from. I sighed and resisted an urge to roll my eyes. I did tell you it's an old magician's house. Everyone's so upset by it you, Twill, the Brinkwood people. Why weren't the cult scared? None of this would have happened. Because they're fools, Zheng purred, gaze still locked onto the house. Zheng, I've known you for one morning, and this is the second time you've wanted to fight a building. Unless you're secretly intending to murder Evelyn or steal her books, I don't think the guards will pay you any attention, and the house won't care. It's not a haunted house, there's nothing to be afraid of. The sharp grin returned to Zheng's face, directed down at me. Afraid? Perhaps you should be afraid of this house, Shaman. Well, I'm not. It's home, it's treated me well, and it's where my friends live. Speaking of which, Zheng, I don't mean to imply, and I do want to just get indoors already, but dash. Spit it out. You won't get violent with anybody, will you? Anybody? Zheng purred. Any of my friends. You know what I mean. And if the house bites? I huffed, curling my freezing toes against the pathway flagstones. Bite back. And without further ado, I marched up the path and knocked on the front door. Luckily for my remaining credibility, Zheng decided to join me, a tower of muscle at my shoulder ready to threaten, kill, or eat anybody who wasn't supposed to be here. If she'd hung back, well, I would have had to retreat and try again. Maybe go around the back, find Tenny. I'd check on her as soon as I could. Nobody answered my knock. The house echoed with a long pause through which dark things crept in silence. I rattled the handle and knocked again. It's me. I called out. I don't have my key, for obvious reasons. My mind backed up a step and I looked at the door properly and my heart crawled into my throat. Number 12, Barnslow Drive had indeed been broken into, quite expertly. The keyhole showed a scuffed ring of fresh metal amid the decades of old scratches, and the thick wood had been dented slightly, about level with my head, the lock been forced, a shoulder rammed against the door. After Twill had run out into the night, had Rain closed the bolts? I didn't recall. If only we'd locked it properly, if only. A rapid patter of feet sounded suddenly from inside the house. I jumped, my heart leapt, and my stomach dropped. Something bumped into the door, turned the lock and rammed back the bolts with a clatter. Oh. I backed up, right into Zheng. She put a hand on my shoulder and put herself in front of me, just as the door flew open. Sharp amber eyes in an angelic face, wide and blinking in surprise. Twill. I half shouted her name in a shudder of relief. Suddenly my knees felt weak and rubbery. Twill didn't hear me, not from behind 7 feet of zombie muscle. I scurried around Jing to hug my friend, not even thinking, but then things got tiresomely predictable. Twill catapulted herself backward from Jing in a feat of canine gymnastic shock. I flinched and swallowed a yelp. She landed already bristling with fur and claw and the elongating snout wrapping itself around her human face, growling deep and loud through clenched teeth, not a warning, a war cry. Twill. Twill, it's me, it's fine, it's me. I blurted out as I hurried over the threshold. Preem agreed with a clink from inside her bottle. Wolfish eyes caught me and Twill's entire body jerked as she aborted a forward charge. Heather, she growled through a snout of ghostly wolf flesh. Yes. Yes, it's me, I'm here, and I'm not okay, but I'm unhurt. Wait, no, that's not accurate. I am hurt. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the moment, an edge of hysteria in my voice. My strength was draining with relief, my body knew I was home. This warm dark cavern of old wood and familiar scents, of our shoes by the door and the unique way the light through the curtains dusted the front room with plush shadows. A wall of warm air washed over me, the heating still turned up against the cold outdoors. And under it all, the faint iron scent of blood tainted the air. Blood, and cleaning chemicals. Zheng had to duck to follow me through the doorway, then straightened back up to her full height. Twill's eyes flicked between me, the giant zombie, the huge glowing bottle in my arms, and the twisted wooden mannequin over Zheng's shoulder. Much more of that and she'd make herself dizzy. Twill, it's okay, I almost laughed again. It's okay, we're all friends here. Like a huge jungle cat squaring off against a rival, Zheng showed all her teeth, and grinned at Twill. Langren, she purred. And you can knock that off. I snapped at Zheng, emboldened by finally being home. And please, shut the door before somebody sees us. Please. Zheng closed the door without removing her eyes from Twill. My werewolf friend growled back as Zheng's grin widened again. Please, both of you, please, I repeated, exasperated. I am exhausted, we are in a crisis, please. Heather? Twill asked through gritted teeth. You've gotta be joking. I freed her, I rushed to explain. Zheng, I freed her. She's on our side, my side, sort of. Zheng, this is Twill, please dash. We've met, Zheng rumbled. Never got to have a proper fight, did we, skin changer? Twill reacted like a startled hound, blinking and shaking her head. Hey, what, you talk proper now. I have a mouth, I must use it. She saved my life this morning, I said to Twill. Yes, she is extremely dangerous, but not to us. I think. Your trusted are mine, Shaman, Zheng purred, but her grin stayed fixed on Twill. But don't you want to feel it too, Langren? I haven't had a good fight, a real fight, in decades. We'll both walk away, no real skin in the game, just the sheer joy of it. Zheng grumbled like a tiger having a dream, but finally allowed her shark's grin to simmer down to a dark smolder. She shrugged, and Preem's wooden body rattled on her shoulder. I'm up for a round with you anytime, skin changer. Not indoors, you're not. I tooted. A ripple of change passed through Twill's transformed musculature. Her wolf flesh melted away, wisps curling and vanishing into nothing as she tilted her chin up at Zheng, all human again. Beat you last time, didn't I? What, you want a rematch between my foot and your face? No, Zheng corrected her. You ran away. That should have alerted me to how dire the situation was. Twill refusing to rise to the bait. Instead, she stepped forward and pulled me into a fierce hug. Careful, I winced as Preem's bottle was squished against my abdomen. Sometimes Twill didn't know her own strength. Stomach's very bruised. Ow. Yes, I managed. Thank you. A wave of emotion welled up in my chest, but I swallowed it down. My body said rest, you're home, everything's going to be alright. I told it no, we still had miles to go. Okay, is a relative term, but I am alive. Thank Zheng. Twill glanced up at the zombie, frowning hard. Zheng shrugged and stepped away from us to prop up Preem's altered wooden mannequin on some of the many boxes of junk Evelyn kept stacked in the front room. Better than dumping Preem's body on the floor, I suppose, but it still hurt to see. The hell is that? Twill asked. Luggage, Zheng purred. Preem's body. Twill gaped at me. Oh, don't worry, I hurried, and held up the bottle. She's in here, this is her, for the moment. Say hi. Hi, Preem. Clink, went Preem. I think we can put her back together, I said. Twill nodded, frowning, quite lost indeed. The hell happened, Heather, where were you? Bad places, then the ground. Long story. Twill, where's everybody else? I'm worried sick, I think they took Rain, at least that's what the look on her face made it obvious. She's not here, is she? Twill winced and shook her head. Hoped she was with you. The cultists kidnapped her. I think. Shit. Twill swore through her teeth. Last night, I got back here as fast as I could, I really did, I promise, but you and her were both gone already. I'm sorry. Evie won't wake up. Kimberly, I think she was hiding somewhere, under a table or some shit, and dash. Kim's okay. Yeah, Twill nodded. Scared, you know. But yeah. We put Evie upstairs in her bedroom, and Kim's been doing stuff, you know. Magic? Trying to get Evie to wake up. I called my mum too, but she says none of them can come into town right now, not with this going on. My folks are in full panic mode, I'm supposed to be at home, but sod them. Evie won't wake up. Heather, I can't wake her up. I looked at Twill, really looked at Twill, and realized she was closer to the edge than I, face puffy with lack of sleep and panic, eyes wild, still in the same clothes she'd been wearing when she'd torn out into the dark last night. Her easy exterior was cracking. Nothing to chase, nothing to punch, a faint shaking in her chest and face. She didn't know what to do. I did. We're going to wake Evelyn up, and I'm going to find Rain, I said, and surprised myself with the conviction in my voice. In truth, I had no idea if we could do either of those things, but if we wanted a ghost of a chance, then Twill had to believe, because I might need her, so my job was to make her believe. Yeah, Twill mouthed. Twill. We will. We absolutely will. I will do anything. Understand? Clink, agreed Preem. Yeah. Yeah, we will, we can do this. She nodded, going along with me. Right. We can. Oh. Her face suddenly lit up. You can make things vanish. Right? I can, yes. I blinked, rewound, replayed that word. I'm sorry, Twill, the what? The corpses, she gestured at the floor and the wall behind me, and the door frame. And the inside of the door. In all the excitement I had failed to notice the wood was slightly damp, and still stained faintly in a way recent scrubbing had failed to completely eliminate. The whole area was punctuated by several patches of damage that looked like impact craters from railway spikes. I reconstructed the scene in my head, blood on the floorboards, blood up the walls, blood up the door. My eyes traveled upward, and I flinched. One of Evelyn's spider servitors still hung over the doorway, in an ambush position, so well concealed I hadn't seen it when I'd stepped inside. The I-Cult had paid a high price for invading my home. Thank you, I said to it. Next time, don't let anyone take Rain, please. It's not one of the invisible spiders, is it? Twill whispered, as if it might hear her. Yes. It is, I sighed. Ugh. Well, yeah then, I guess that must have been it. When I got here, there were these two dead guys on the floor. Huge mess. Put them both in the kitchen, but dash. Twill wasn't exactly a master of misdirection, or of concealing her emotions. Her eyes flicked to the closed door to the disused sitting room. I followed her gaze. I thought you said you put them in the kitchen. Yeah. Yeah, I did. They're both still there, you know, getting cold and stiff. It's just, it's been a bit of a complex morning and we've got, her eyes wandered over my shoulder, frowning at Zheng. I sighed. We can discuss this in front of Zheng. She's on my side, and yes, she's also a violent cannibalistic demon dash. Cannibal implies the same species, Zheng purred, almost as if distracted. I'm no monkey. But she saved my life twice this morning, and I think she wants to help. I can hear you, Langren, Zheng rumbled. What? Our friendly neighborhood flesh-eating demon had also noticed the spider servitor, and was now locked in a staring contest. The spider's head of crystalline eyes rotated to return Zheng's look, both of them frozen in the moment of eye contact. Two supernatural beasties vying for who was bigger and scarier. It's fine, I said with a sigh. She and the spider are squaring off, just like you did too. I'm pretty sure it doesn't care. It's okay, Zheng, I think. I have eaten spider many times, Zheng purred. Not one of those, I'd wager, I said. A first time for every kind of meat. I'm extra glad I can't see any of this, Twill said, hands up in surrender. I stared at Zheng for a moment, trying to figure out if she was serious. The last thing we needed was a demon getting into a death match with what was left of our security system. Look, Heather, Twill was saying. It's just, we've got a situation to deal with. A really delicate situation, and maybe she should go somewhere else for a bit. Caught between a territorial zombie and Twill sounding worryingly untwill-like, I frowned at the latter in confusion. Delicate situation? What are you talking about? Her eyes slid to the sitting room door again. She winced and struggled over a word or two. I was about to tell her to get on with it. I'm too tired, I need to sit, I need to wash my sore feet, I need to eat, and we need to save our friends when a cry of delight split the air. My name. Heather. My name, from the most unexpected source. Thundering down the stairs in a clatter of bare feet, flying the distance between us in a twirl of plaid skirt and pink poncho, throwing herself at me in an uninhibited tackle hug, here came Lozzie. I almost couldn't believe my eyes and barely remained standing when she hit me, that flying hug not just for show. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders, squeezed all the air out of me, and nuzzled her face into my neck. Pulling back, laughing, making me laugh back at her in surprised delight, wheezing from the bruises in my stomach but not caring. I almost dropped Preem's bottle, but Twill reached in and took it from me, like sticking her hands between a pair of wrestling ferrets. You're here. You're here. You came back. Lozzie laughed at me. You too, I croaked, speechless, smiling all over. Ow. She made a sound like a small excited animal, and hugged me tight. I went, ow, again but I didn't care. Yeah, Twill added. And your spooky friend is here too. Turned up out of nowhere. Why didn't you say anything? I asked Twill over Lozzie's shoulder, hugging her hard as I could stand. Other things on my mind. Lozzie pulled back again, half dancing on her bare feet. God, she looked so healthy, her elfin face glowing, well-fed and clean though still pale and mushroom-like, as if her skin had seen no sun in months. Which made sense if she'd been outside, beyond the reach of terrestrial light. Where'd she gotten the clothes? The plaid skirt was so her, and the pink poncho had a cute little hood with floppy rabbit ears. Her hair was everywhere as she raked back wisps out of her face. She smelled of foreign bath soap and medical moisturizer, mango and Vaseline. And underneath it all, the lingering taint of Wonderland ash. I have so many things I need to ask you, I said, overwhelmed by emotion. Heather. Heather, where did you go? Why did you go? She laughed, bewildered with me. I was getting you out. Something grabbed me. Pulled us apart. Lozzie, I wouldn't leave, not when I thought you were gone. Ah, she sighed, nodding and smiling. Same thing. I can't leave. Have you tried? I can't get back out, it's so weird. You tried to leave again? An unexpected barb of pain twisted in my chest. To find you. You were supposed to be here. I swallowed and focused. Hands on your ankles. Dead hands. Yeah. You too. Weird, huh? Lozzie smiled at me, a bouncing, happy sort of smile, and hugged me again. Ah, ow. Lozzie, I'm sore, I'm so sore. She'd come back to me. She was healthy and whole and safe. I laughed, and realized I was crying too. You got me from Wonderland. You got me. Thank you, Lozzie. Lozzie. The tears came on full now, I couldn't stop them, and my voice emerged as a whine. Lozzie, I've lost Rain. They took her somewhere. I can't, I dash. No. Lozzie pulled back, her face set in a serious little frown. They can't do that. I'll help. You love her, this is important. We'll get her back, I have an idea already. You do. Of course you do. I took a shuddering breath, sniffed, and managed to stop the tears. Lozzie nodded and helped wipe my face. I had to focus. Lozzie likely did not have any ideas that made sense in this reality, but her sheer blinding enthusiasm helped hold me up. Little Lauren, Zheng purred, almost a whisper, and we both looked up. Zheng wore an expression I hadn't thought her capable of, a lost fragile wonder, her staring contest with the spider forgotten. One huge hand reached out and brushed the top of Lozzie's head, the gentlest gesture I'd seen Zheng make. Oh. Lozzie lit up again. You're awake. Hi, Zheng. She gave the zombie a little wave. How's it feel? This is I spoke to you, little Lauren, in dreams, Zheng purred, the stone of her voice softened and blurred. She blinked heavily. Can demons cry? You gifted me with dreams where I was free. Yeah, it was fun. Lozzie wriggled out of my arms, leaving me more than a little unsteady on my unsupported legs, and threw a hug at Zheng, as unafraid and uninhibited as she had been with me, utterly unintimidated by this rippling giant of barely suppressed violence. Zheng looked as surprised as I felt. Lozzie danced away again, panting and red in the face with excitement. Did you get her out, Heather? How did you do that? I just removed some of her tattoos. It wasn't easy, it made me pass out. But it was simple enough. Lozzie tilted her head back and forth quickly, as if this feat was beyond her imagining. Wow, cool. Heather, you're so clever. I could never figure it out. Little Lauren, Zheng grinned again. Ha! I remember now. My little mooncalf. Mooncalf? Lozzie pulled a face, stuck out her tongue and pulled down on one lower eyelid. Rude. Zheng rumbled a low laugh, then froze. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, a tiny voice came from the kitchen doorway. Kimberly, one shuffled step into the room, staring at Zheng with poorly concealed horror, then at me with an uncertain smile. Heather, hi. I'm glad you're alright. I'm sorry. It's alright, Kim, I said, trying to sound soft. I'm glad you're okay too, you dash. Zheng moved like a foxhound after the scent of blood. She pounced past me in a blur of uncoiling muscle made of quicksilver and lightning. I flinched and gasped. Lozzie let out a little whoop and hopped backward. Twill growled like a startled dog and Kimberly wasn't fast enough to scream. Zheng picked her up by the throat and slammed her against the back wall, knocking all the breath out of her lungs. "Little wizard," Zheng hissed through a shark-toothed grin. Legs kicking, eyes wide in naked terror, Kimberly opened her mouth to scream. Zheng's other hand whipped out like a snake and darted forward into the opening, fist jamming Kimberly's jaw wide open. "Zheng, no." Luckily for Kimberly's tongue, I got there first, one hand on Zheng's arm. I knew that all the strength in my body wouldn't be enough to stop the demon's little finger, but the tone in my voice worked better than any physical restraint. Not a shrill cry, not a scream of panic. A command. A command given to a freed slave. Slowly, her hand still ready to rip Kimberly's tongue out at the root, Zheng turned her flesh-eating toothy grin on me. She radiated cold malice. She thought Kimberly was a threat, but I'd offended her, in probably the single way anyone could. "Zheng. Shaman," she rumbled through her teeth. "Kimberly is my friend." Keeping my voice steady was impossible. I let it quiver. I was terrified, why pretend otherwise? I glanced at Kimberly, pinned to the wall and staring back at me, panting through her nose. She moaned a muted scream around Zheng's fist, her feet scrabbling at the wall for purchase. In the corner of my eye I saw Twill circling to Zheng's other side, half transformed, ready to take her up on that offer of a rematch. "Twill, don't," I said out loud. "Zheng, Kimberly is mine. Understand?" I recall this one, skulking and worming, filling her grey meat with secrets. Making more like me. What she did in the past does not matter. Or what she was forced to do. Now, she's mine. And free, like you. Zheng let out a growl, a nasty one, like a mountain disagreeing with me. I hiccuped. And, I added, shaking all over. I hiccuped again. "You said that removing your tattoos guaranteed no wizard can bind you with words. I heard you say that. Was that a lie? Is Kimberly dangerous to you?" "I don't think she is. She's helped me. She's with me. Are you with me?" Zheng grimaced. She turned a hateful gaze on Kimberly, made the poor woman squeeze her eyes shut, still fighting to breathe. "Don't hurt Flowsy, she's harmless," Lozzie said. Her little blonde head appeared over Zheng's arm, peering up at Kimberly. "She's kind of boring and stiff, but she's harmless. Sweet if you catch her alone." Zheng looked down at Lozzie and the awful toothy grin died in an instant, as if it couldn't touch her little mooncalf. The fury in Zheng's frame dropped away. She leveled a mere nasty look at Kimberly instead, and her huge tongue slowly inched out of her mouth to brush Kimberly's cringing cheek, before whipping back again. "Whoa shit what," Twill muttered. "One betraying twitch from you, wizard," Zheng purred in Kimberly's face, and clacked her teeth together. Kimberly tried to nod difficult with a fist in your mouth and Zheng dropped her to the floor and stepped back. Hacking and coughing, wheezing for breath, shaking and crying, Kimberly flinched as I went to my knees and put my arms around her. "I'm so sorry, Kim. I'm sorry. I didn't think, that's it. I'm sorry. I hate magic so much," Kimberly whined. "Good," Zheng purred. "Yes, Zheng," I added quickly. "Please just leave it alone." Zheng grumbled and refused to look at anybody. "It's okay, Flowsy, I don't hate you." Lozzie patted Kimberly on the head too, but I suspect that didn't help. Twill, still eyeing Zheng like an unexploded bomb, fetched Kim a glass of water, which went down without obstruction and was quickly followed by another. It took us a while to get the poor woman back to her feet, by which time Zheng had retreated to the other side of the room, brooding like a moody teenager. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here," Kimberly kept saying. "I keep screwing everything up, I can't dash." "You don't screw everything up, and that wasn't your fault," I said. "It was," Kimberly hiccuped. I deserved it. The zombie's right, I did so many terrible things. And now I've screwed up everything here too. We can't wake Miss Say up, and I hid when you needed help. And it's my fault that we've got, she trailed off at a look from Twill. I glanced between them. She thinks the police woman's her fault, Lozzie said. Typical Flowsy. Police? I echoed, going cold inside. Oh no, what is this? Twill. Oops. Lozzie bit her lips. We're not talking about that. I was, getting there. Okay, said Twill. I'm so sorry, it's all my fault, Kimberly repeated. I shouldn't have opened the front door in the first place. Twill. I demanded. Her eyes slid to the closed door of the disused sitting room. With terrible inevitability and a growing sense of unreality, I stepped over to the door, turned the handle, and opened it on the curtained and shadowed room inside. I'm not certain exactly how long I stared. It felt both too long and too short at the same time. Mortified, my mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour, yet unable to process the implications of what lay in front of me. A pair of solidly stoic eyes stared back at me, neither accusing nor pleading, but quite afraid. I closed the door, paused, then turned the handle and opened it again, hoping that something different might be inside. Nope, still the same. I closed the door a second time. Straightened up, took a breath, let it out slowly. Heather Twill started. Please, Twill. I raised a finger. Please tell me that is not a real police constable we have bound and gagged in there. Well, actually no, not a constable, Twill said, her throat bobbing with an uncomfortable swallow. If she was a regular old bobby she'd be in uniform, right? I stared at her, lost for words, and also just plain lost in incredulous disbelief. Twill, what does that mean? Lozzie said policewoman, quite clearly. I pointed at Lozzie, who dutifully nodded. Did I imagine that? Am I hallucinating from stress? Please tell me that woman in there is a cultist, or at least a random member of the public. Please. No. Kim, what did she say, at the door? I turned to Kimberly. She cringed away at the look on my face, but for once I couldn't soften my expression. Well. She introduced herself as Detective Sergeant. Kimberly all but squeaked, her voice still raw from Zhang's hand squeezing her throat earlier. For a moment I refused to believe my ears, staring, blinking, but not seeing. Kimberly bit her lip and lowered her head as I glanced between her and Twill. And did she volunteer this information before, or after you decided to tie her up? Twill pulled a teeth-gritting grimace, ducking her head and hunching her shoulders like a flinching hound, pained, sheepish, embarrassed, and mortified all at once. Normally I found her mannerisms endearing, almost kind of sweet. In her best moments I very much understood what Evelyn saw in Twill, but right now I felt myself ready to explode in her face. I bit my lips to control myself. Before. Lozzie chirped with a smile. I was listening in. It's not like we had a choice. Twill spread her hands. Our scrub job around the door is pretty bad, and hell, it stinks of blood, right? Even you lot can smell it, can't you? It reeks in here. A little, I managed. Rancid, Jin grunted. I closed my eyes and sighed. Assault as well. Wonderful. I had to. She talked really fast, but it was all surface, no depth, Lozzie added, almost to herself. She was really good at talking. I didn't like her, she wasn't genuine. At least she's by herself, Kimberly said. And that makes it better. How, exactly? I snapped at her. I didn't mean to, and she didn't deserve that. Kimberly flinched, her hands jerking up to shield herself from my anger. Zhang let out an approving chuckle. I hissed a tut at myself through my teeth, but I didn't have the mental bandwidth to care right now, let alone apologize. That's why I didn't answer the door right away when you knocked, Twill said. Thought it might be another one. Or, a follow-up. Twill. Twill, you are absolutely sure she's what she says she is? You're certain? Yeah. Here, she pulled a compact card wallet from one of her coat pockets and held it up, black leather with a Sherriford police crest on the front. Her badge is real. Warrant card? Whatever you call it. I let out a shaking breath. Great. Great. I'm really sorry, I'm so sorry, it's all my fault, Kimberly whined. ACAB. Lozzie half-laughed. I don't like police either, Kimberly said. But we can't do this. We can't. We're going to get in so much trouble. We're already in dash. Please, just show her we're dash. I could take her out. Show her, oh no, wait dash. Police meat tastes as good as any other, Shaman. 10 minutes alone, then burn the clothing dash. I tuned them out, the growing argument between Twill and Kimberly, Lozzie's inappropriate laughter and Zheng's disgusting suggestions. A high-pitched ringing sound echoed in my ears. My breath tightened in my chest. A tremor took my hands. A panic attack lurked on the edge of my consciousness. Heather. No rain would catch me if I fell. No time for warm tender recovery and a cup of tea. Yes, I was surrounded by friends and allies, yes, more than one of them carrying their own flavor of risk, but friends and allies all the same but without rain, and teetering on the edge of an abyss. If the police got involved, it was all over. Obstruction by the normal, sane world of human activity in institutions, day jobs and the scientific method, would destroy any hope we had. Evelyn did not need a hospital, she needed a mage. Rain didn't need a missing persons report, she needed me. Heat here. Woo. Lozzie waved a hand in front of my face. I met her eyes but didn't really make contact. She squeezed my shoulders in a hug, gentle and careful with my bruised stomach. My own arms responded on automatic until she let go again and she turned away to reply to something from Twill, as the argument spiraled onward. The police were already involved. It was too late. The police detective bound at wrist and ankle in the disused sitting room, gagged with an old tea towel from our kitchen. I struggled to hold on to the important fact that she was a person, the fleeting impression of a few scraps of pinned-back blonde hair, a dark suit, piercing eyes. A person, a human being, like me. But she was also the first exploratory feeler of a bureaucratic leviathan every bit as inhuman as anything from outside. What do I do? Imitate Rain? She'd know what to do, with her confidence and her lightning-fast plans, her voice never leaving room for doubt, always pulling me back up to my feet when I felt lost. I wasn't Rain, I couldn't be like her. I couldn't even be like Evelyn. I was me, little Heather, and what could I do? Ah! The dark glimmering of a solution presented itself, like a poisonous flower unfolding in the back of my mind. No, absolutely not, I murmured. But I would do anything to save Rain. All the problems in the way must be excised. Which meant I had to work hard now, to avoid becoming a monster by the time I saw her again. Panic fell away, replaced with a cold, shaking focus like an icicle grown inside my chest. I shed the filthy blanket from my shoulders, straightened up, and filled my lungs. Everyone shut up. Stop talking, I yelled, then added, almost as an afterthought, please. It worked. 4 pairs of eyes flinching, surprised, amused, and hurt in turn all looked at me as I took another breath and gathered my thoughts. Heather? Twill ventured. I raised a finger and made a face. That means stay quiet, Zheng rumbled for me. The shaman is thinking. It goes for you too, I hissed at her, then turned to Lozzie. I'm sorry Lozzie, it's fine. I love you, I'm not angry with you. Lozzie nodded and blinked, biting her bottom lip, like a child caught in adult's crossfire. I filed away that, I love you, for later, a burst of truth in the heat of the moment. I did love Lozzie, like a little sister I'd never had, but this wasn't the time to think about the million questions I had for her. This was the time for practical solutions. How long? I said, my voice quiet but my tone steady, not through effort of will but sheer necessity. How long's the police detective been tied up in there? Twill's eyes went up and left, thinking. 'Bout an hour, bit more. And you did confiscate her mobile phone, any pocket knives, and, I don't know, pagers? Bent paper clips? Lipstick? I waved my raised finger at Twill when she frowned with incredulity. No, I know what you're going to say, and no. Assume for a moment that we're dealing with a master detective, the protagonist of her own bloody television program. Is there any way she can escape? I don't think so. I emptied her pockets, and she's tied up with gardening wire. I couldn't find anything else so I, used my elbow grease, bent it round. Twill rummaged in her jacket pockets again and produced an expensive-looking smartphone. This was hers. Is it switched off? Switch it off, then wipe your fingerprints off it, I said. Are there any other problems I don't know about? No more surprises, from any of you. If you tell me now, you have amnesty from being shouted at later. Stack knocked on the door round about dawn, Twill said to her credit, without hesitation. I stared at her for a second, not certain if I believed my ears. Amy Stack. The ex-cult assassin Amy Stack. Right. Okay. What did she want? Did you take her head off, by any chance? Please, that would be wonderful. Nah. Twill shrugged. I mean, I would have, but by the time I got to the door she backed up all the way to the garden gate, like she knew it was risky. She wanted to talk, I think, but I chased her off, and she had a car parked nearby, so, Twill pulled another guilty grimace. I didn't want to leave Evelyn alone here, case it was a trap. Good. Good thinking, I forced myself to say, to compliment Twill, to keep her head above water. It's a pity you didn't get her, but you did the right thing. Thank you, Twill. Of course she didn't give chase, not after the object lesson of last night, after she left the house. Twill must be feeling terrible guilt, feeling responsible. Kimberly started, then stopped and looked down when I paid attention to her. It doesn't matter, but I was supposed to be at work 4 hours ago. Probably lost my job for real this time. Like I said, it doesn't really matter, compared to everything else. It does matter, I managed. I'm sorry, Kim. We'll do something about that. Just, not right now. Lozzie raised her hand up high, elbow straight. Yes, Lozzie. I put Tenny into her cocoon. You what? That's what you called her, right? It's a real cute name. With the tentacles and the black goo. When I made her she was supposed to pupate on her own after she'd grown up a bit, but she didn't and I don't know why, but I found her out in your garden this morning and just gave her a little nudge along, and poof. She's up in the tree in the garden, she'll be fine, it's not really a problem but I thought I better tell you in case you wonder where she is. Or if you look out there. It's kinda cute. Lozzie smiled a very Lozzie smile. Yeah, Twill said, looking askance at her. She just ran out there and waved her arms in the air for a bit. Okay, I'll thank you, I said. We'll later. Clink agreed Preem, from where Twill had left her bottle on the floor. Cocoon. Pupate. Was Tenny going to turn into a pneumosomatic butterfly with a 20-foot wingspan? I put that firmly to one side for now. Bizarre, but not a crisis. Not yet, at least. Alright, my turn, I said. The cult isn't dead, obviously, Alexander Lilban did some last-ditch deal, and he's dead but now they're worshipping the eye. None of you really know what that means dash. I do. Lozzie raised her hand. Yes, except Lozzie, because she saved me from it this morning. The fake version of her is dead, by the way, she killed it. And Glasswick Tower looks like the inside of an intestine because it thinks it's Alexander's body. According to Zheng here. I gestured politely over my shoulder. Cool, Twill grunted, eyeing the zombie again. And here's what we're going to do, I said. First, Kimberly. And me? Yes, you. You've been trying to wake Evelyn but it's not working, is that correct? Yes. I'm sorry. I only know the things I was taught. If I had time with her books, maybe dash. See that bottle? That's Preem, the cultists tore her out of her body, which is also right next to you. Clink, went Preem. Kimberly's eyes went wide and she turned her head slowly, as if expecting to see an actual corpse lying next to her, then froze for a second at the sight of the twisted wooden mannequin laid out on the boxes. You used to put outsiders into bodies for the Sherrowford cult, I said. Can you still do it? In theory. She frowned, swallowed, looking very uncertain. I'm not sure, I dash. Can you put Preem back into her body for me? Without, I don't know, losing her somehow. Kimberly stared at the bottle for a second, her brow creasing in a frown that turned from confused, approximately human. Lozzie had helped me hobble upstairs to the bathroom, where I'd gulped down pints of cold water, wiped the worst of the dried blood from my face, and ran my bleeding foot under the hot tap in the bathtub, wincing as I'd scrubbed it clean to ward off infection. I'd replaced my stinking pajamas with Rain's dirty clothes instead, an oversized black band t-shirt and plaid pajama bottoms, plucked from the floor of our bedroom. Wrapped myself in her scent like a suit of armor. Socks too, over the hastily applied bandage around my savaged soul. Between the blood and the fierce sweat and the Wonderland ash, I probably reeked like an abattoir fire, but I didn't care right now. Evelyn was on a time limit, one perhaps more pressing than Rain's. None of us had any medical training, any knowledge about what to do with a person in a coma. If she stayed like this for much longer she'd need an 4 drip for hydration, she'd need to be turned to prevent bedsores, and I could only imagine what being bedbound would do to the already acute pain problems in her back and hips. We had to wake her, fast. We need a mage, I said, and realized I was trying to convince myself. We've got Kim, Twill said from the corner of her mouth. A real one. Apologies to those absent. Yeah, I know, okay. Kim's tried stuff, nothing works. Who the hell is this Felicity woman, anyway? I don't rightly know. Back before Christmas, we were trying to figure out where Tenny came from. That's the spirit that's been following me around. Turned out Lozzie sent it. I nodded toward the culprit, who lit up with a little satisfied smile. But before we knew that, Evelyn called around people she used to know, from her childhood, or teenage years, I think. Mages. One of them was Felicity. It was a weird phone call. I suppressed a shudder at the memory of that strange voice which had answered first, that whisper of sulfur across the humming phone lines, but I didn't mention it out loud. Scary? Lozzie said, all the same. Was she scary? Not really, I lied. I don't give a shit about scary, can we trust her? Twill asked. Evelyn had some choice words for her, I admitted. I got the impression she didn't like Felicity very much, but Rain seemed to think it would be safe to ask her for help. Safe for Evie, I mean. I trust Rain's judgment, often more than I trust my own. My thumb hesitated over the call button. There was still time to turn back, to admit we did have another option, one I'd already thought of last night. Last night, with Rain still at my side. Hyperdimensional mathematics could wake Evelyn. Hyperdimensional mathematics could do anything. In theory. But I could also fail, and pass out, for hours on end. I knew I was fragile right now, I felt it in my bones and the hollow in my chest, the floaty sensation in my skin, like it was too big for me. Any use of brain math might put me over the edge and I had no other way to find Rain. I had one shot at that, and spending it on Evelyn might cost me everything. Silently, in the guilt-racked privacy of my own mind, I apologized to her. I told her I cared, as much as I did for Rain. But I still made the choice. I pressed the call button and put the phone to my ear, listening to it ring. Twill shifted to the end of the bed and leaned in close. Lozzie tilted her head, only half interested, her eyes elsewhere. The phone rang and rang and rang. Echoes in the darkness. On and on, my heart tightening in my chest, hoping I got Felicity first and not that other voice. Click. A moment of silence stretched out, as if the line had connected to an abyss, a marine trench of lightless pressure. Something inhaled as if waking up. Tannenbaum House, a woman's voice answered in a clumsy half-mumble. Hello, good morning. Is this? I stumbled. I'd only ever heard Felicity once before, her voice on speakerphone and fighting against Evelyn's contempt. We don't know each other, but am I speaking to Felicity? I'm sorry, it's rude of me, but I don't know your surname. Yes. Yes, this is Felicity speaking, came the hesitant half-mumble once more. Nobody uses this number. Who are you? My name is Heather. Heather Morell. I'm not a mage but I'm in the know, and I'm a friend of Evelyn say. Oh. So much in that little sound. Deadened surprise. Old pain, the kind of ache that never really heals. Loss, of a sort I knew. Felicity, whoever she was, had reacted to Evelyn's name with an echo of how I might react to Maisie's. Hello. Miss? Heather? Hello. Felicity asked into my shocked pause. Twill caught my eyes, boggling at why I wasn't answering. I wet my lips and gathered myself. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm Evie's friend, maybe her best friend. Listen, she's been hurt, magically, and I'm led to understand that you might be able to help. Might be willing. Evie's been hurt. How? What happened? Felicity asked, her voice urgent but still blurred by the mumble, as if she couldn't open her mouth properly. I'd assumed the phone call had woken her, but now I wondered at some other, darker cause. Where's Rain? Why isn't she calling me instead? Rain is indisposed at the moment. Who are you? This is a trick. Who are you? I'm Rain's girlfriend, all right. I snapped at her. I'm not trying to con you. Evelyn's in a coma, and she won't wake up. The cause is too complex to explain. Magic. Can you help, or not? A long pause, a thinking pause, during which Felicity swallowed then burped gently. I'm sorry. I have to be paranoid. Yes, I sighed. I'm familiar with the mage lifestyle. Of course I can help Evie, I'd do anything for her, Felicity said. I heard her stand up on the other side of the phone, and caught a hint of falling rain on thin windowpanes. A scuffle of paper and pens, the scrape of a chair on a stone floor. But well, do you know, I don't know where she lives now. I don't think she wants me to. Which is I'll need an address. Sherrowford. Do you know the city? I've never been there, but it's a few hours' drive at most, if I leave now. Which I will, Heather. Hello. Before I give you the address, there's something else first. Yes. Evelyn, when she called you a few months ago, she described you to me as a sociopathic pederast demonophile. Twill's eyebrows well near left her forehead. She gaped at me. Lozzie put her hand over her scandalized smirk. Oh, Felicity said. Hollow, hurt, old pain. I don't care what you are, I said. Twill was mouthing an outraged, what, at me, but I carried on. I'm just letting you know that I don't entirely trust you. I want my friend to be safe and well again, and I don't care what you are or what you did in the past, as long as you're coming here to help Evie. Rain seemed to think you're okay. If you're not dash. A sigh on the other end of the phone. None of those things are true. If you're not, I repeated. If you're a threat, I'll get rid of you. I've killed mages before. What? I thought you said you were Dash. I'm not a mage, no. I'm much worse. And I have to be paranoid too, for Evie as well. A swallow from the other end of the phone. I understand. I suppose I deserved that, didn't I? She's told me nothing about you, Felicity. I don't know who you are. A sad puff of laughter. Doing what I never could, huh? Standing up to something like me. She's lucky to have you, Heather. I hope so. Here. I gave her the full address for number 12, Barnslow Drive, postcode and all, and heard her scratching to write it down as I rattled it off. I'll be there as soon as I can, look for me in 3 or 4 hours, I think. I drive an old Range Rover, so don't blow it up when I get there, or whatever it is you do. I won't. Thank you. Please be fast. Try my best. The moment she hung up I let out a huge breath and started shaking all over, hiccuped twice and felt bile threaten to escape my throat. Fake confidence shed from me all at once like melted skin. I sniffed hard and hugged myself, dropping the phone onto Evie's little laptop desk with a clatter. Lozzie was suddenly on me, squeezing me hard. Ah, ow, ow, bruises, I said, and she eased off just enough. I hiccuped again. Bloody hell, Heather, Twill said. Where'd you get all that from? I can be kind of scary, when I want, I managed, resisting the urge to curl up and hide. Yeah. Nice. Good job, yeah. She nodded along, believing we were going to be alright. I'd made her believe. You're not scary, Lozzie said. You're Heather. I still don't like the sound of that woman, Twill said. If she smells wrong, she's not going anywhere near Evie. And she's definitely not being alone with her. I nodded in mute agreement, no emotional energy left for argument. That's one down. One of many problems. I'm sorry, what? I shook my head. No, actually. Sorry. Twill shrugged. Right you are then, boss girl. What's next? Twill hopped up from the bed, cast one last glance back at Evelyn's sleeping form, and looked to me for directions. For orders. For confidence. Boss girl needs to eat, Lozzie said. I held myself back from the answer I wanted to give. Next should be Rain, the great unknown. To whom anything could be happening. But that wasn't sensible, that wasn't smart, I couldn't burn myself out before we were ready, before we were safe, before my effort might mean success. I drew myself up and clenched down on the shaking. Time enough for that later. Next we deal with the old Bill. The officer's name was Nicole Webb, and she lived up admirably to my mental image of a lady police detective. Short and compact, hair up in a tight blonde bun, in her mid to late 30s but trim from half marathons, martial arts, and a sensible diet. No jewelry, and minimal makeup on a tightly alert face. Her legs were drawn up as best she could with her ankles bound, the gardening wire biting into the fabric of her suit trousers, her back against the sofa's footrest. Intelligent, watchful eyes looked up at me the moment I opened the door on the shadowed room. She was angry and scared, projecting the anger to hide the fear. Hiding it well, yes, but I was somewhat of an expert on fear. Not surprising, after an hour alone in a room with Zheng. We'd gotten her name from her police badge, which I now held before me like a talisman, the key to her mind. Shaman, Zheng rumbled at me, arms crossed, radiating boredom. Is there meat in your fridge? Yes, Zheng, I think there's some chicken, I replied without taking my eyes off the detective. I'm sorry for making you stand here all this time. You don't make me do anything, Zheng grunted, and ducked through the door, stomping off toward the kitchen before I had a chance to stop her. Twill and Lozzie both hopped out of her path, then gathered at the door again. Would hardly be fair for me to sit in a chair, I said, and gently levered myself down to the floor. I got halfway there before I remembered my stomach, and rather spoilt the effect as I winced and straightened back up, then had to awkwardly sit down with far too much use of my hands. Ah, ow. Ow, okay. Okay, sitting. There we are, here on the same level. The detective and I stared at each other, until finally her eyes left me and took in Twill and Lozzie hovering in the doorway. The anger in her eyes melted away, replaced with a tentative curious frown. She'd probably been expecting a man to come in here and shoot her twice in the back of the head, but instead she got a disheveled college student and 2 teenage girls. Her frown went through a most interesting transformation. She didn't know how to play this situation. She didn't know what we were. Her brow was sticky with dried sweat. Another sigh escaped me. Twill. Can you get this gag out of her mouth? Why is she gagged, anyway? Why was that necessary? So she couldn't scream for help. Seemed pretty obvious to me, Twill ventured, then grimaced when I gave her an unimpressed glare. She crossed the room and undid the knotted tea towel serving as a gag, and revealed the rest of Nicole's face, a small, neat mouth and a very mobile jaw, which Nicole instantly worked up and down to relieve the stiffness. She watched me, and watched Twill, and even watched Lozzie still lurking in the doorway, as she wet her lips and took several deep breaths. Finally, she seemed to settle on me. "All right, I'll go first then," she said. "You obviously want to talk to me, or you wouldn't have removed that gag. What do you want to talk about?" My heart hammered in my chest. Why was this, of all things, so nerve-wracking? I'd faced down a flesh-eating monster this morning, and almost been eaten by a building. This should be nothing. "What's your name?" she carried on. "Mine's Nico Dash." "Nicole, yes, I know," I almost snapped. "Nicole Webb, Detective Sergeant, Derbyshire Constabulary." She smiled a little. "You got that off my badge, didn't you?" It was how she used her voice, soft and measured, gentle and coaxing. She was rigid with tension, but doing an incredible job of controlling her breathing, of playing the part she thought would get her out of here. She made me feel every bit what I actually was, an ill and exhausted young woman, not a supernatural mastermind. "We did, yes," I managed, trying to stick to the script. "My name is Heather Morell, and I do have a question for you, yes." "Ask away, please," she said quickly, before I could continue. I knew exactly what she was doing, building rapport. She caught my pause and carried through again. "I'm all ears, Heather, please. Are you a real police detective, or?" I trailed off, my heart hammering like a deer trying to batter itself to pieces against a fence. "Oh hell, I can't do this," I spat. "Heather." The detective spoke very quickly now. "Can't do what? What are you being forced to do here? Talk to me, please, I can help Dash." "Heather." Twill hissed. We need to dash." "Wrong end of the stick," Lozzie chirped from the doorway, then let out a flighty little sigh. "This isn't going to work," I said. "She doesn't have the slightest clue what she's walked into, and Zheng hasn't made the impact I hoped." "What have I walked into?" Nicole asked. "Please, help me understand, and I can help you. Your big friend didn't say a word to me, no, but she sure is big. She coming back too?" Nicole lowered her voice. "Or are you sort of glad she's not listening in right now?" I shook my head, at a loss, trying not to face the inevitable even as I said it. "I do not have time to deal with you. I just don't. We can't do this, I don't know how." Nicole's front finally cracked just a little. She frowned, and that was real, an unrehearsed, unglossed, genuine quirk of confusion. "Heather, yes. Yes. That's me. Are you in charge here?" I blinked at her, paused, my mouth open like an idiot. "Yes. Yes, I suppose I am. Right now, I am the closest thing this bunch has to a leader, yes. You're all a bit young for this sort of thing, aren't you?" Nicole tried another smile, wet her lips. "Any of you a day over 20? I am, in fact. A couple of weeks ago, I said. Hey, Heather, happy birthday. Lozzie lit up behind me. I had mine too. We should do a double party when this is all over. This sort of thing. Twill echoed, frowning. Covering up a double murder. Striking a deal with a detective, Nicole said, oddly casual, though the tension in her eyes gave her away. I assume that is what you're trying to do. I sighed and put my face in my hand. Nobody here's committed murder. Not today. Nicole puffed out a long breath and pulled a if you say so sort of face. I did see 2 bodies. Hiding a body is a lot of work, you know, and 99% of the time it's not successful, pieces get found, forensics turn stuff up. Is one of you covering for a relative? A father? An uncle? Some sort of fight gone wrong? Look, all 3 of you girls are in trouble, I'm not going to lie, but I can help you. You feel like you're trapped, like you've got no choice, but that's not true, you dash. What do you think Sheng was? I asked. She's a professional, isn't she? Nicole's voice dropped to a hushed whisper, her face into a serious frown. She's watching you 3, while you wait for a real cleanup crew. Or she was involved, she killed those 2 men. If that's right, you need to untie me right now and dash. She's a demon, I said. And my friend. Nicole paused for a lot longer than she needed to, then nodded slowly. Alright, we'll go with that. So is she, dash. The bodies you saw were killed by a servitor that's a kind of spirit, which you can't see put here by the grandmother of the owner of this house, who is currently upstairs in a coma, because we're having a crisis. The words tumbled out of me, as I tried to avoid what I had to do. My voice shook, the plan all coming apart. Multiple crises, in fact. And that is why I do not have time to deal with you. I need to find my partner, who has been kidnapped by actual evil cultists who worship an alien god outside of our reality. Are you following me so far? Lozzie caught the upset in my voice and made a noise like she wanted to hug me, but she hung back. Nicole was doing a very bad job of concealing her conclusion that she was surrounded by not just murderers and criminals, but mad ones. Right, she said. Right. Okay. This servitor, where is it? Does it look like a person? Is it here now? Oh come on. Lozzie demanded of her. Use your noggin, think. Think. What did you think happened to you when Twill overpowered you earlier? I asked. Was that normal? That was just bad luck. Props to you, by the way, she nodded to Twill. Twill, is it? Had me banged to rights with that arm lock. Thanks. She's a werewolf, I said. Heather, Twill whined, then almost grinned to herself. She loved it really, the showing off. Fuzzy, Lozzie said with a cheeky grin, then darted behind the doorframe to escape Twill's little growl. A werewolf? Nicole's eyebrows went up. Okay. No, not okay. It's not okay, because you need to accept it, and I don't know how to make you do that. And what about Jing? You think she's tall? She's nearly 7 feet, can't you see that isn't normal? People don't get that tall, not built like her. What are you trying to tell me here? I've stumbled into a bad urban fantasy novel. Nicole smiled as she spoke, but she failed to keep the incredulity out of her voice. Now she thought I was just messing with her. I wished I was. PFFFFFFFT, Lozzie blew a raspberry from the doorway. No imagination. She's never gonna get it. We have to make her get it. We have to show her, I said, my voice tight and shaking with the racing of my heart. Or I have to kill her.